Kumagakure no Sato, otherwise known as the village hidden in the clouds. It was home to many, the Raikage, who was the fastest man alive, the second largest and most powerful shinobi force after Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves, and the most, and best if not for Karigakure's 7 swordsmen, Kenjutsu users outside the samurai. One such sword wielder was currently practicing, standing in the middle of a large, raised stone circle, surrounded by mountains and water, going through several advanced katas with her sword, starting slow, but then going faster and faster, until she and her tanto were nothing but a blur. This woman was Samui, a Junin, the lowest-ranking member of the shinobi forces, for Kumo. She had been such for 5 years, raising her skills until she was at the level of a very high Chunin, with only lack of experience keeping her from being Jonin material. It was a technique that Kumo used, not allowing their Junin to go to the Chunin exams for a few years, letting them get stronger, so that Kumo would look all that much better when they do eventually enter. Samui was a fair-skinned woman of tall stature, with a stoic and aloof expression on her face. She had blue eyes and straight, blonde hair framing her face cut in an asymmetrical bob style with the front bangs reaching her shoulders. She wore a very low-cut outfit which displayed her sizable cleavage, with mesh armor underneath, a short skirt and red hand guards, finishing the outfit with high boots. 1. Her tanto sheath was strapped horizontally across her lower back. As she was finishing the first set of exercises, she finally noticed that there was somebody watching her, sitting down on a set of steps leading up to a mountain. While she was by no means a natural, she was one of the strongest Junin sensor in Kumo, as she had undergone specific training to be as such since before she had graduated, knowing that sensors were more valuable to their villages, as well as more useful during missions. As such, she was able to see this person had an almost disturbing amount of chakra, so much so that it was shocking she hadn't noticed it before, around as much as her sensei, until it suddenly disappeared, lowering down to the level of a Chunin. So that's why I didn't notice him. He was suppressing his chakra, which means that he either slipped in his control, or he intentionally revealed himself. And if he did that, then he must want something, surmised Samui to herself, before seeming to relax, though she kept her blade in her hand, and her muscles tense. "May I help you?" she asked of her visitor as she studied him. The stranger was a rather handsome male, if she were so inclined to admit as much. He was a tall man, being around an inch or two taller than she was, seeming to be about her age, with bright, electric blue eyes, neon yellow hair, a rather angular face, marred by what appeared to be 6 scars, 3 on each cheek. His clothing was the strangest hodgepodge of international garments, consisting of the light gray flak jacket of Konoha Anbu, the forest green kimono worn by Kiri Hunter Nin, which he wore open, a set of Hate 2, from the samurai of Tetsu no Kuni, Land of Iron, on each of which was painted a ceiling array, a black t-shirt, a pair of black samurai pants, black shinobi sandals, as well as a pair of kunai pouches on the back of his belt. On his left hip hung a katana. She also noticed that he wasn't wearing a Hide, which meant that he probably wasn't a shinobi. But then, how did he control his chakra so well? "I see that you use a blade," he commented easily, mildly annoying Samui, before that was extinguished by her stoic nature. "Yes, and so does pretty much everyone from Kumo. What is so special about me?" she inquired, getting a low chuckle from the blonde, who got up and began to walk towards her. "Well, from what I hear, Samui-san, you're the student of the best Kenjutsu expert in Kumo, and I figured that he taught you a few things. And on that note, I'd like to challenge you to a spar," replied the man, Samui raising an eyebrow at the fact he knew who she was, as she didn't have an entry in the bingo book yet, and was only a Junin. "And how would you know who I am? You don't seem to be from any village, if those trophies of yours are anything to go by," she stated, giving a pointed glance at his ensemble. "Trophies? I don't have any of my trophies on me," he stated, looking at himself as though checking to see if there was something he had forgotten, before realizing what she must have meant. "Do you mean the clothes?" he asked, chuckling. "They aren't trophies, they were given to me by friends of mine on my travels," explained the exceedingly mellow blonde. "But you do have trophies," thought Samui to herself, catching his seeming slip of the tongue. "Nevertheless, why would an unknown man wish to spar with me? If my sensei is of such interest to you, would you not rather face him?" "It's not cool to go after me to get to him," she stated. She wasn't trying to avoid the fight, she was simply curious as to his goals, and what her part in them was. "Oh, I would love to face off against your master, but I'm nowhere near his level, and I have no desire to be stabbed full of electrified toothpicks while he raps," came his chuckled response, though he did shiver at that last part, having been present for one of the man's public performances. "You have yet to explain as to why you wish to fight me," pointed out Samui, wishing he'd either finally get to the point, or go away, so that she could get back to training, since the Chunin exams were 3 months away. Not to mention that they were in Konoha this time, so she had to be extra sharp to show that Konoha Junon were nothing but children playing at ninja. "I haven't?" he asked, surprised, before rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. "Sorry about that. Mifune-sensei always did say that I talk too much. I remember one time, and I'm rambling again. Anyways, I won a fact against you to see how I measure up. You're the best student of the best Kumo swordsman, so I figured that you'd be a good match. If I win, I'll go and challenge someone else. Maybe Daru-san." His bingo book entry said he had a rather interesting blade. He rambled, his eyes glinting when he mentioned Daru's sword. "I digress, but the reason I want to fight you is simple. You use a sword." "That is it? That's the only reason?" she asked, slightly incredulously. "But of course, if I'm to be the best in the world, then I have to beat everyone, don't I?" he asked with a very serious expression, completely out of the blue, actually managing to get an incredibly out-of-character response from Kumo's Junon definition of stoicism. "I wish to be the best swordsman in the world," he answered seriously, startling her slightly with his seemingly rapid mood swings, as his serious expression morphed back into his easygoing one. But she was not fooled anymore. She knew this easygoing man meant every word. "That's cool, but if we are to do this, then may I at least know your name?" "Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto," said the now identified blonde, before he slammed his hand on the ground, a black sealing matrix appearing, and encircling the two of them, before fading away, though not disappearing. "What was that?" demanded the Kumo Junon, as she fell into a combat stance, before realizing that she couldn't mold chakra. "What did you do to me?" "Nothing. I simply made it so that no one could use chakra in a 10-meter radius of where I'm standing. That should cover this little platform, no? If you don't believe me, then you are free to leave." "That wasn't very cool. Why would you do such a thing?" she inquired, thinking that this Naruto had just as much of a disadvantage as she did, if he was affected like she was. "Because I don't want to fight a shinobi," he stated. "I want to fight a swordsman," he finished, drawing his katana. "And why wouldn't you want to fight as a shinobi? If that little display of Fuinjutsu is any guarantee, then you are obviously dangerous," said Samui, as she and Naruto faced off against one another on the platform, Samui holding her tanto in a reverse grip in her right hand, the back of the blade running along her forearm, both of her fists level with her mouth, with her right hand in front, her legs spread to give her a steady stance. Naruto, on the other hand, was in a modified den stance, with both hands on the hilt of his katana, the top of his right hand wrapped firmly around the part just below the tsuba, with his left held loosely around the pommel, his hands level with his pelvis, the tip of the blade around an inch off the ground, his left foot in front of him and pointing at his opponent, with his right foot behind him and pointing to his left. "Because even shinobi who are masters of the blade won't hesitate to resort to ninjutsu if given the chance," replied Naruto seriously, before he brought his katana blade side up, attempting a rising slash, which was dodged by Samui, who had spun clockwise, in order to bring the point of her tanto around to stab him. Dodging by stepping back, Naruto quickly brought his sword around, defecting her follow-up attempt to rake her blade across his chest. He then began to spin his weapon, arms close to his body, down behind his right shoulder, up in front of him, down to his left, up in front, down to his right, up in front, forcing her to dodge the onslaught, until he surprised her by turning as he brought his blade up one last time, turned his back to her, bringing the blade down in the opposite direction, and using the momentum to stab it at her from between his left elbow and his ribcage, actually managing to cut her right side, which, while not life-threatening, was still rather painful. He then windmilled the blade to bring the sword full circle again to bring it down in a slash aimed at her head, which she blocked, further aggravating the injury. Angling her blade, Naruto's katana then slid down it, making his sword impact the ground, as she switched to a normal grip on her tanto, and tried to bring it across his neck. Astonishingly, Naruto released the hold his left hand had on the katana, bringing it up with his right, blocking her strike with the pommel, before using her own attack to enhance the momentum of his, slashing at her neck, only to sever a few strands of hair as he jumped back. Their spar went on for a full 20 minutes, Naruto managing to score several more hits, while only taking one in return. He's good. Considering that the way he was talking about shinobi, he probably isn't one, though he does know Fuinjutsu, which is regarded as the most dangerous of the shinobi arts. He most likely dedicates all his time to his sword, meaning he probably has little to no formal shinobi training. This little spar is getting pretty cool. I wonder which one of us would win were we to go all out, thought Samui to herself, actually getting a little hot under the collar. While she did love her village, and being a shinobi, one of the main reasons that she had become a shinobi was to use a blade. She had always loved them, hearing stories about the romanticism of them from her ex-samurai father, hearing tales about how he'd seen people cut mountains in half, how one of his friends could make a cut so clean that you wouldn't even know you were decapitated until a gentle gust of wind pushed your head off, of people who were so graceful that they literally danced around a battlefield with their sword, how some were so fast that they could draw their blade, carve a statue of themselves from a block of marble, and sheath it while your eyes were closed during a blink. But considering the fact that all samurai were men, and her own natural patriotism, she had instead become a shinobi due to her fascination with swords, and it was only a matter of time for her to develop a liking for swordsmen. Unfortunately, the only ones who were any good were either too old for her tastes or just plain weird, and the ones her age were all weaker than her. Then comes this Naruto, and not only is he able to easily keep up with her, but was actually winning, not to mention the fact he was also her age. Would it be cool for us to go all out? She asked, referring to the use of chakra. Nodding with a sigh after a second of thought, Naruto sheathed his katana, and backed towards the edge of the chakra-free zone, an interested Samui watching the entire time. Kneeling down and examining the circle, Naruto eventually smiled, and smudged one of the kanji, the rest glowing and disappearing afterwards, Samui once again feeling her chakra when he was finished. One would only be able to disrupt it by that specific kanji, or with a powerful enough area of affect attack, otherwise some rather bad things would happen. He explained cordially at her interested expression. You gave that information away rather easily. She noted, the blonde once again rubbing the back of his head in embarrassment. Yeah, maybe, but it's not like you could do anything with that information. I mean, I doubt you saw which one I actually smudged, and unless you attack me somewhere else in the world, I'm probably not going to use this on you again if I win, he stated, sending the katana to the seal on his left thigh, simultaneously drawing a sword from his right. This sword was unlike any Samui had ever seen before, it being a long, thin sword with no curve whatsoever, and a double-sided blade. The entire thing looked to be one solid piece of dark brown metal, lacking a guard, with a cloth-wrapped hilt, and a large green crystal at the end. As he brandished this new sword, fire suddenly appeared flowing around it, making beautiful patterns, the red, orange and yellow growing in volume, before it all suddenly disappeared. Do you like my trophy? Asked Naruto, referencing their earlier conversation, before he once again burst into action, bringing the blade down in a one-handed downwards chop, which Samui blocked, only to immediately regret the decision, as a burst of fire rained down on her, lightly burning her face, clothes and hair for less than a second, before she kicked him away, jumping back to escape. Not cool. Is he trying to kill me? She questioned in her mind, only to gape like a fish when she saw the large molten notch in her tanto. Seeing that Kenjutsu wouldn't work, she then began going no hand signs, only for Naruto to blur in front of her, forcing her to duck as he attempted a horizontal strike, feeling the heat of the flames that appeared around the blade. How is that for all out? Questioned the smug blonde. How did you do that? No one on the planet is able to use katan, fire style, to such an extent. Is it a Kekkei Genkai? She asked, knowing that except for maybe a few high-level techniques, you couldn't actually control a katan jutsu after it had left the body. To control fire to such an extent was unheard of. I don't really know, he admitted, shrugging as she uncharacteristically face-faulted, It's actually the ability of my sword. By channeling chakra through it, I'm able to create and control fire. I'm not completely sure what else it does, if anything, since I killed the last guy who had it, but that's a story for another time. Now, let's do this!" shouted the blonde man, raising the sword into a Hasso stance, his left foot forward, the blade pointing up, with the hilt just in front of his right shoulder. Seeing this, Samui once again took up a sturdy stance, only this time, instead of holding it to her side in a reverse grip, she shifted her body to the side, body facing towards Naruto's right, her right foot pointing towards him, her left hand behind with her right holding her tanto with it pointing at Naruto at shoulder height. Both knowing that this would be the final exchange, Samui drawing her tanto and channeling her chakra through her blade, before hesitating as she saw Naruto's eyes glow red. They didn't turn red, but rather glowed. As unnerving as this was, they just as quickly returned to their normal blue, though she was immediately on guard, before watching as Naruto's blade produce fire, the flames converging on the edge of the blade, glowing an unnerving white. "Is he really trying to kill me?" wondered Samui, before the two of them blurred forward, both swinging their swords faster than most could see, ending up 10 feet apart, backs towards one another, before Samui's tanto fell to pieces, and already cauterized wounds appeared on the backs of both her hands, on each of her thighs, one on her stomach, one on her collarbone, and one on her left cheek. Turning, she noticed that Naruto didn't have so much as a paper cut from the clash, before she collapsed. "How are you not even injured? I know that I hit you," she demanded, throwing the useless hilt of the tanto into the lake surrounding them. "Genjutsu," he replied easily, getting a wry grin from Samui, before she took his hand, which he had extended to help her up. When she was fully up, she tightened her grip on his hand, before grabbing his collar with the other, and bringing him in for a kiss. While surprised at first, the fact that he was a teenager quickly caught up with Naruto, and he started kissing her back, wrapping his arms around her waist, as she connected her hands behind his neck. After around 30 seconds, Samui broke the kiss, and told the blonde male, "Meet me at the gates at 7 p.m. You're taking me on a date tonight. Someplace formal." Before walking away up the stairs. Dazed from the sudden kiss, it took him a few seconds to actually register what she had said, and, not against it or anything, asked, "Don't I have a say in this?" "No," came the shouted reply, as the girl walked away, slightly limping from the pain of her injuries, before disappearing over the lip of the cliff. Kumo's main gate. Arriving a few minutes early, Naruto could do nothing but fidget, remembering the advice of a few of his teachers that an angry woman was the scariest thing on the planet, and so had decided to show up, rather than skip town, not to mention the fact he was a hot-blooded teen, as well as the several dozen other potential opponents in the village. "Why haven't I come here before again?" wondered Naruto to himself, before remembering and shivering. "Oh yeah, that's why." Shaking off the horrifying thoughts of rabid monkeys and men in garter belts, his thoughts drifted to the reason he was standing where he was, when he was Samui. He had never been on a date before, as his Ronin-esque lifestyle had prevented such a thing, and knowing that he and the girl could never really be anything more than friends, as it would be unfair to start a relationship, only to leave, he wondered about why he was doing this, until he remembered he didn't want to make her angry. "I was sort of expecting you to not show," came the subject of his thoughts' voice, causing him to look to where the voice came from, only for his jaw to nearly dislocate, along with that of pretty much every other male there, including the gate guards. Tonight, she was clad in a spaghetti-strapped black sleeveless dress, skin-tight and going down to mid-thigh. It had a somewhat conservative neckline, meaning that it showed less cleavage than her regular outfit. Other than that, she wasn't any different, her hair still in its bob, and she wasn't wearing any makeup or perfume. She did however have several bandages wrapped around the places that he'd cut her, with one pasted on her cheek, and one on her collarbone. "I feel slightly underdressed," confessed Naruto, clad in a dark red dress shirt, with a black tie and slacks, as well as shiny leather dress shoes. He hadn't really done anything else, other than a shower right beforehand, his hair still a rat's nest, and his body free of cologne. He also had a slender wrapped package beneath one arm that she was curious about, but figured that he'd tell her eventually. He'd only actually been hit once by his now date, and he'd already healed from it. "I think you look nice. Now, where are we going?" she questioned, getting a sigh from her date, him offering her his arm, which she took, linking her elbow around his, as he led her through the village. After about a 5-minute walk, the two blondes stopped in front of a rather high-end resort. It wasn't exactly the creme of the crop, but Samui was thankful for that, as the only ones who went there were stuffy nobles and rich merchants. This place was a shinobi-run place, serving meals specifically designed with low fat and high nutrition and energy, with a mostly shinobi clientele. Though in all honesty, it was actually 3 restaurants in one, with 3 sections sharing a kitchen, with entrances that you went through dependent on your income level. With the door they stood in front of the most expensive and highest quality, reserved for those who took regular A rank, or survived in S rank. It was a place where shinobi would get a taste of the high life every now and then, before they got back to their rough-and-tumble occupation. "How did you get a reservation here?" asked Samui, knowing that, as a Genin, she wouldn't really be able to afford a meal here for another few years. "I bribed the maitre d'," he explained casually, as the two of them were seated at a table near a window on a mezzanine, a door leading to a balcony a few feet to the right of the table, and ordered their food, Naruto placing the package on the table to his right. "What is this?" asked Naruto after the two of them received their drinks, slightly startling his companion, before she gained a small smile, which had him forcing down a small blush. "Dinner." "No, I mean what are we doing here, and if you say eating then I'm leaving." "It's a date," she answered with a sigh, having expected this to come up at some point. "And why would you want to date me? I'm obviously not from your village, so I'll eventually leave. I've known you for less than 12 hours as of now, and I kicked your ass within an hour of us meeting. I like strong men. Even better, I like strong swordsmen. The fact of the matter is that you're the only one my age who can soundly beat me in a spar. The only other people who can do that are either twice my age, or insufferable. The fact that you're not from this village isn't all that big a deal considering the fact that you aren't a shinobi, and about you leaving? I didn't ask for a relationship, just a date," she explained, Naruto seeming to accept the answer. The two of them then lapsed into a pleasant rapport over the appetizers. During a pleasant debate about which element was best to enhance shuriken with before throwing them, Naruto glanced out of the window, raising his eyebrow at the sight that greeted him. Samui-san. Would you happen to know a dark-skinned girl with red hair and yellow eyes, and a dark-skinned boy with pure white hair who likes suckers?" "Why yeah," she answered, slightly surprised, before becoming suspicious. "They are my teammates, Kurundo Mooi. How is it that you know their descriptions, and not their names?" Once again glancing out the window, Naruto plaintively sipped his drink before nodding his head towards said window. Confused, she looked out, and almost flinched, seeing that the two of them were on the balcony outside, with Kuro literally pressing her face against the window, her gaze going back and forth between the two blondes. "Who the fuck is that guy, and why do you look like hell?" questioned the redhead loud enough to be heard through the reinforced glass, the other shinobi in the restaurant glancing towards them, before resuming their meals. "I'm going to kill them. I'm going to kill them. I'm going to kill them," came the extremely annoyed mantra through Samui's head, as she stood up, and went out onto the balcony to confront her team. "What the hell are the two of you doing here? It's not cool of you to follow me around," she demanded of the two of them, Omoo immediately asking questions that quickly spiraled into the absurd, which were aimed more at himself than anything, before he was smacked on the back of the head by Kuro. "What if that guy's actually a spy, and he's just dating you so he can get close to me, that way he can learn my cool moves, and wham!" "Shut up, Omoo. Who the hell is that, Samui?" she demanded, ignoring Samui's earlier question. "He's my date. Now, what are you two doing here?" "Your date? Your date? When the fuck did you start dating, and why the fuck haven't we met this asshole?" demanded the redhead, her voice rising as she went on. "Because I just met him today. And before you say anything, no. He didn't ask me out, I asked him. He came up to me earlier, and asked for a spar. I accepted, and he won, easily," explained Samui, getting incredulous looks from her teammates. "He beat you? And you asked him out? Why the fuck would you do that? Don't you know he could be an enemy shinobi? Don't you know that he could be a spy? A thief? A rapist? You don't start a relationship with a person who beat your ass," began the redhead, before a very weird thought popped into her head. Unless you're into that sort of thing. 4. Why the hell would you do such a thing? Demanded Kaoru, finishing off her rant. I asked him out for reasons of my own, and I'm not looking for a relationship, just a date. Besides, I didn't know that I had to tell you every little fact about my life. Samui told the girl icily, causing the redhead to visibly swallow on nothing. Whatever. Just so you know, I'm going to tell Kirobai-sensei about this, said Kuro matter-of-factly, as she grabbed her yammering-prone comrade by the collar, and disappeared. You do that, murmured Samui to herself, as she walked back into the restaurant, and took her seat. Do you think she knew I could hear her? Asked Naruto, highly uncomfortable about the insinuations the girl had made about him. It's cool, Kuro's that way with everybody at first. Responded the blonde female. She did raise some cogent points. I'll respect your privacy, but I do want to know why you told me to take you someplace formal, stated the whiskered teen, earning a raised brow from his date, before a mischievous thought popped into her head. Is it wrong for a girl to want to be pampered every now and again? She asked with an innocent voice, tilting her head to the side slightly and leaning forwards a little. At this, Naruto quickly spun around to face the opposite direction, a massive blush covering his face at how cute she looked, with a few other males on the mezzanine shooting back from nosebleeds. Turning back a few seconds later, still blushing slightly, he missed the triumphant smirk that had crossed her features. It's just that you don't really seem like that kind of girl, he answered honestly, pissing off Samui. Oh? She asked dangerously, and what exactly kind of girl do I seem like? A kunoichi, said Naruto without hesitation, hiding his blind panic behind an expressionless mask, Samui's anger disappearing in understanding. Ah, cool. Well, there's no reason a kunoichi can't be pampered, now is there? I suppose not. Acquiesced the blonde male, before returning to his meal. By the way, what's in the package? Asked Samui after a few minutes of silence, pointing her knife at the object, which had been just sitting there the entire time. Oh, that. Thank you for reminding me, I had honestly forgotten all about that, he said, more to himself than to her. It's actually something for you. I thought you'd like it since I destroyed your Tonto earlier today. He finished, pushing said package over to her, to which Samui put down her silverware, and began to unwrap it. After all the brown paper had been torn off, she then opened the box, revealing a beautiful Tonto. This Tonto, however, was entirely black, from its sheath, to its pommel, to its blade. It was a bit longer than her now destroyed one, being almost long enough to be considered a wakizashi, though it was roughly the same weight. It's beautiful. How did you get it, and why are you giving it to me? She questioned, not understanding why he'd give something so obviously valuable to someone he just met. I got it from a rather foul-mouthed Dewa missing nin in Kubi no Kuni, Land of Neck. The reason I'm giving it to you? Well, to be honest, I'm not really a fan of the short blades. I prefer those with a little more reach and weight to them. I'd rather you'd have it, since you'd actually use it. And, I'm sorry about destroying your old one, explained Naruto, laughing nervously and rubbing the back of his head when he was finished. Thank you, came the whisper, so low that Naruto almost didn't catch it. It's no problem. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah. Futon, wind, chakra, while it doesn't paralyze or speed up the shuriken, would be able to cut them in half without touching them if you put enough into it, not to mention that you wouldn't need to speed it up if you were skilled enough. He told her, getting a grin, the awkwardness of Kuronomo's visit behind them. Yes, but you'd either have to have extremely high-quality ones, or chakra-conducting ones. Standard-issue shuriken couldn't hold that much, and it would destroy itself. Raten, lightning, caused the shuriken to go faster than without, as well as the paralyzing effects. Add to that the iron of the shuriken allowing you to pump in more, and the fact that Raten could stop the target's heart, and you've got yourself a winner. She continued the debate, the two of them once again lapsing into a rather nice rapport. However, after the two of them had eaten, and all that lay before them was a cup of coffee and a small dessert each, she asked the question that had been bothering her all day. How were you able to defeat me so easily? Upon hearing this, Naruto quickly sighed, and placed his coffee back onto the table. Do you really want to know? He asked, sighing again as the attractive woman next to him nodded. It's because of my Kekkei Genkai, he said, holding up a hand to silence any questions she might have. "No, it doesn't control fire, or any of the other elements. I wasn't lying when I told you that it was the sword that did that. No, my Kekkei Genkai is a Dujutsu, technique. It's kinda like a mix between the Sharingan and Byakugan, and as far as I know, I'm the first to have it. With it, I can see long distances, I can cast genjutsu that fool even the Byakugan, I get analytical abilities like the Sharingan, allowing me to guess what you're going to do next, and a few other things," he admitted, smiling sheepishly at the girl. "Amazing, though. I can't help but notice that you're rather prone to giving out information that would be best kept under wraps," Samui told him after a few moments of silence, thinking about what to do with this information. "I could just let him go, but that might make Raikage-sama upset with me. I could tell Kirabai-sensei, and he'll tell Raikage-sama, and they'll probably arrest him to harvest his eyes and sperm. I could convince him to stay here, but if he does, he'd be ordered to impregnate as many women as possible, so that there's a higher chance of him to pass on the ability," she mused, before a small voice in the back of her head said something that had her blushing. "Maybe you can be one of them." "Yeah, probably. I wasn't trained to be a shinobi, and I guess I can consider you a friend, and I'm not all that good a liar when it comes to my friends," responded the blonde male, not seeing her blushing as he was rubbing the back of his head with his eyes closed with a nervous smile. I don't see as to why not. He is rather handsome, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't attracted to him. Not to mention that with his Jujutsu and his massive chakra reserves, any child he fathered could be as powerful as the Uchiha were. And with his Kenjutsu he'd be a rather fun sparring partner, and his skills in Fuinjutsu are better than anyone in the village, after Miwa-sama died sealing the Nibi into Yugito-sama. Then there's his collection of blades. If that fire sword and the Tanto he gave me are just a couple of his trophies, then what other ones do those seals of his contain? The only downside is the fact of how young the both of us are. Then again, since he isn't a shinobi he'd be able to stay home with the children." So caught up in her thoughts, she didn't even realize that Naruto was trying to get her attention until he started snapping his fingers an inch away from her eyes. As she was startled out of her thoughts, her shinobi training kicked in, and she grabbed his arm, and tried to put it in some form of lock, only for her day to wrench it from her grasp with a surprising amount of strength. "Damn, Samui-san, I'm sorry," said Naruto, cradling his hand in mock hurt, as a pouting expression crossed his face. "I apologize, Naruto-kun," she told him, causing him to raise his eyebrow at the sudden affectionate term. "I was caught up in my thoughts, and you startled me. It wasn't cool of me to react the way I did. And please, call me Samui-chan," she finished, beginning her plan to get the blonde to stay in Kumo, though she tried not to add "with me" to that statement. With that, the two of them finished the meal. Afterwards, Samui showed Naruto around Kumo, until it was late enough that she figured it was time to go home, her arm linked with Naruto's the entire way. When the two of them had reached the entrance to her apartment building, they halted. "Well, Samui-chan, I had a lot of fun. We'll have to do this again sometime," stated Naruto, not really expecting another after what Samui told him at the beginning. "Yes, we will," she replied, mustering the courage to do what she was about to. Seeing the blonde male walk away, she stopped him by wrapping a hand around his wrist. "You know, there's one more thing that we still need to do," began the blue-eyed man, before he was silenced by a kiss from the blonde bombshell. Like the first time, he was startled at first, before he once again got into it, kissing her back with just as much passion. After a few seconds, he started getting bold, hoisting her left leg up, and pinning her against the door. Damn, he's good at this. Damn, she's good at this. However, the kiss eventually had to end, no matter how much neither really wanted to, though one of them tried to deny that fact. Samui then opened the door to her apartment complex after Naruto released her leg, but before she entered, she told him, "Saturday, same time, somewhere normal this time, I'll be waiting at the front gate," before she entered, leaving Naruto there with a goofy smile and slightly sore lips. After about 5 minutes of him just standing there, he finally regained his bearings enough. He told the empty air that I'll be there and walked back to the hotel he rented for his stay, whistling the entire way. After about 5 minutes of just standing there, he finally regained his bearings enough, told the empty air that I'll be there, and walked back to the hotel he had rented for his stay, whistling the entire way. A noticeably younger Naruto, maybe 10 or 11, walked the woods, missing the Konoha Anbu flak jacket, as well as the Kiri Hunter Nin kimono, but he did have the samurai Hate and the plain katana in his belt. As he went, he couldn't help but glance back towards the three men following him, two wearing the full-body set of armor, signifying they were part of Tetsu no Kuni's samurai, with the third man being his sensei. The third man was easily identifiable, being a man with long, waist-length silver hair, heavy wrinkles beneath his black eyes, with a thin beard and goatee. For clothing he had a full dark gray bodysuit, with darker gray gloves, sandals, and bandages wrapped around his head. Atop that, he wore a more traditional armor, with a chest plate, and segmented shoulder, leg, and crotch guards. He wore a cloth belt, with a pouch on the back, and a beautiful katana on his right hip. Mifune-sensei, where are we going again? Asked the blonde, turning around to look back at the three men again, seeing the indulgent smile on his master's face as he walked backwards. Well, Kohai. As I said before we left, and an hour after that, and an hour after that, and after that, we are headed to Takumi Village, the village of artisans, in order to get more weapons for the new trainees. Responded Mifune, his apprentice rubbing the back of his head sheepishly in response, turning to face front again. How come that kid isn't wearing the initiate's attire? Asked one of the samurai, named Meio, to the other, completely confused with the situation, as he stared at the blonde boy about a dozen yards in front of them, the two generic samurai trailing about 5 yards behind their leader. Don't you know? That child is Mifune-sama's disciple. He isn't going to join our order, he's just learning how to use the sword. Wondered the taller and stockier one, whose name was Kentai. What? Is he allowed to do that? Or even better, why would he do that? Of course he is, he's Mifune-sama. He can do whatever the hell he wants. Even the kidges don't piss him off. As to why, I don't know if it's the whole story, but from what I can tell, Mifune-sama went to Konohagakure no Sato, and found him. From what I hear he had just entered the village, when he heard a rather loud commotion. He followed the noise, and boom. He finds the kid. Now, he's in an alleyway, surrounded by a bunch of drunks, with several more bleeding to death on the ground. This little 4 or maybe 5-year-old kid has this dinky little piece of shit Tanto, completely rusted through, wouldn't weed a damn garden with the thing. So, there he is, watching this brat fight off grown men, and winning, though to be fair, they were all tossed, and none of them had anything more than a rock, or maybe a broken bottle. Little bastard's eyes are glowing like the fires of hell and fighting for his life. Before you know it, Mifune-sama's killed them all, and offered the Gaki a place as his apprentice. From what I hear, Hokage-sama didn't want to let him go, but Mifune-sama threatened to not let any Konoha shinobi in Tetsu no Kuni anymore, and he had to, said the more informed of the two. Why didn't the third want to let the kid go? Asked the instigator. No idea. Wait, how is it that you don't know all this? I'm new. Oh. Well, congratulations on passing your ordeal, stated the senior samurai, slapping his new comrade on the back. Thank you, I had to work hard, but I acquiesced the junior, before being interrupted by their commander. Enough you two. Naruto, come back here. Ordered Mifune. Hi, Mifune-sama, shouted the two grunts, as they positioned themselves exactly 5 feet behind, and to the side of the samurai leader, as Naruto stopped completely, waiting until he was about 2 feet behind, and to the right of Mifune to continue walking. The reason for this new seriousness being the fact that they were coming up upon the village, a rather picturesque place, several one-story houses, smoke pouring out of chimneys, a town square, a market, all the standard things. It did, however, have at least 10 smithies. The whole village was surrounded by a 10-foot-tall solid wood wall, with a single gate that was about 10 feet across, and completely covered the road. Halt. WHO's there? Came the shouted question from atop the wall. I am Mifune of Tetsu no Kuni. I've come to honor a deal between myself and the leader of your village, shouted the samurai leader, halting 10 yards away from the gate. Seeing the guard on top of the wall conversing with someone below, Naruto couldn't help but ask his master a question. Wouldn't you coming here be rather big news, sensei? More than likely, but it's all procedural. responded the old samurai, waiting for a response, which came about 2 minutes later. "Welcome Mifune-sama. Our leader says that you can come in. Lodging has been prepared for you should you wish to stay the night, and your subordinates shall be allowed to wander anywhere that isn't off limits." "Thank you, the three of you may do as you like. I must meet up with Goshodono to finalize our deal. When you are finished, return to the hotel." "Hi," responded the three of them. Before the two samurai went directly to the hotel, Naruto immediately going over to watch some people make weapons. As the boy walked up to a random man in front of an anvil, he couldn't help but stare. It was enthralling, seeing the man pound the metal into shape, slowly losing its red glow, before seeing the steam let out as it was dunked into a barrel of water. Placing the metal back into the fire, he began to pump at a bellows, causing the fire to become bigger and hotter. "What do you want, brat?" questioned the man, not even turning around to speak to him. I just wanted to watch someone make something," stuttered Naruto, before the man motioned for him to come forward. "Help me out here, brat. Take the handle of these bellows, and start pumping. Use strong pumps rather than fast ones. Don't stop until I tell you," commanded the smith, before taking the piece of metal out the fire, Naruto continuing to pump since he hadn't been told to stop. This process continued, with the smith pounding on the metal, sticking it into the water, placing it into the fire, and taking it out to beat it with a hammer again. Over time, the piece of metal took shape into a garden hoe. During the entire process, Naruto only ever stopped pumping to take off some of his clothes, and put more wood into the fire. Once it was finished, the man placed the gardening tool on a stack of like parts, ready to be attached to wooden poles, and sold in markets, before grabbing another semi-finished hoe, and starting all over again. 3 hours later, the both of them wearing nothing but their pants, sweating like pigs, began to wash off in a water trough, as the smith questioned the blonde child. "So, who are you, and what are you doing in the village? 'Cause I know everyone who lives here, and you don't fit in that category," asked the man gruffly, as he pulled a cigar out of seemingly nowhere, and snapped his fingers, igniting his thumb like a lighter, before using it on the cigar, and shaking out the "I'm here with Mifune-sensei. He's the general of Tetsuno Kuni. We're here to pick up weapons for the initiates," responded Naruto, getting a frown from the smith. "General? Initiates? Is that what you shinobi types call academy students and kage nowadays? You know, those weapons of yours, kunai and such, started as gardening and masonry tools, before you bastards perverted their use from harvesting rice to harvesting lives. And you're what, 10? What are you doing with armor and a weapon? Shouldn't you be playing peekaboo with your friends or something?" demanded the man, inhaling deeply from his cigar, before exhaling heavily, uncaring of the fact that he did so almost directly into Naruto's face. "Actually, Tetsuno Kuni doesn't have any shinobi. Mifune-sensei commands samurai. We use swords, and chakra," responded Naruto, mildly shocking the man. "Really now? I used to forge weapons for you guys. Got sick of it, decided to go back to nice, innocent, gardening tools," commented the artisan, emphasizing the word innocent. "I don't see why you're being so mean," pouted Naruto, earning a grumble from the smith. "I just don't like the way children are forced to be soldiers. Samurai at least have honor, only going into combat when they're adults. But shinobi, they start when they're 12. Though, I guess that's no longer the case. Tell me, how many lives have you taken?" demanded the smith, fixing Naruto with a stern look, as the blonde boy blanched at the accusation. "None. I'm just here because my sensei said it would be good experience to meet the people who make weapons for us," yelled Naruto at the artisan, before he walked away, making his way towards the hotel. "It's only a matter of time until you do. Then you'll be sorry you ever picked up a blade," shouted the man at Naruto's back, unsettling the boy, and giving him something to think about. At the hotel, Naruto wasn't all that surprised to see that his sensei had already returned. He was surprised, however, in the fact that Mifune didn't have a scroll, or anything of that nature on him. "Ah, Naruto. We've been asked to do a favor for Takumi," stated the elder samurai, surprising Naruto, though he guessed his sensei had already told the other two, since they showed no sign of surprise. "Did something happen?" asked Naruto, slightly worried. It seems that one of the shinobi of this village went rouge, and stole something from the village. Since this is a neutral village, they can't go to another village, as it would be seen as favoritism. He asked us to do this, since our country is neutral as well, as a show of good faith. I guess he wants us to bring it back, surmised Kentai, only to get a shake of the head from his general. Hattori Dono said we may keep or destroy the blade, he does not care. He informed me that there are no shinobi skilled enough to use it in the village, except for Hoki-san, who fled with it. Mifune informed the group, but before anyone could respond, boom! The sudden explosion immediately caused mass panic, as the three samurai and Naruto ran towards it, wondering what had happened, only for three people to jump out of the flames. The first was a rather attractive woman, with green, chin-length hair, with yellow bangs bordering her teardrop-shaped face, with pupilless brown eyes. She was wearing a sleeveless fur-lined purple trench coat, which split almost to her crotch at the bottom to allow freedom of movement, over a dark red strapless dress shirt with a pair of belts to secure it to her body. Underneath that she had a pair of dark gray tights with shinobi sandals. On her right arm was what appeared to be a falconer's glove, while on her left she had an arm warmer with brown straps, with a purple glove. Her beige Hittite was almost completely covered by her hair, and rested high on her forehead. The second was a slender boy, with green eyes that were outlined by blue eyeshadow. His blue hair slightly popped out of his white forehead protector, with the rest neatly combed throughout his head. Around his neck was a white scarf that reached down to his pants. He also wore a tight, gray shirt which was sleeveless, and that revealed his entire abdomen. On his arms were gray arm warmers with brown straps that secured them onto his arms. His gray baggy pants were fastened onto his body by a thick, brown belt. The lower part of his pants were tucked into his sandals. On his back was a sword which looked like the top part of a trident, if it were segmented, blue, and put on the hilt of a sword. The third was a broadly built man. He wore a black coat over which was a set of armor which was designed with a silver tiger-like head breastplate and a pair of dark blue pauldrons. His eyes had small black pupils and wavy brown hair with a small beard. For a weapon, he carried a rather large mage. His beige Hittite was worn low, covering his eyebrows as well as part of the eyes themselves, though they seemed to have no effect on his vision. Seeing the samurai, the three of them immediately scattered, hoping to throw them off the trail. Naruto, follow me. Kentai, you take the armored man. Meio, you take the boy, we'll follow the woman, shouted Mifune, before they all left in pursuit of their target. Ryugen vs. Meio. I was wondering who was following me. I guess that beggars can't be choosers, but I was hoping for something other than a grunt. Taunted the boy with the blue sword, after the two of them had run for about 15 minutes. This guy is really effeminate, mused the junior samurai to himself, before he drew two of his blades, and began to channel chakra through them. Oh? That's interesting, mused the rouge shinobi, before he bowed to his opponent. My name is Ryugen, and you have the honor of being the first to die by this blade in almost a century, stated the brunette, before the three blades on his trident-esque sword began to break apart, wires holding the pieces together. Weaving in and out of the whipping blades, Meio was unable to get close enough to strike at the missing artisan, and Ryugen was barely able to make a dent against the samurai due to his armor. As the standoff went on for about 5 more minutes, Ryugen was finally able to get a lucky hit, scoring a blow at the weak part of the armor just below the armpit on the left side, drawing blood. I will not lose to you, yelled Meio, before remembering a technique that was taught to all samurai. Rushing towards the effeminate-looking boy, the samurai skillfully deflected the tendrils of the Garyan sword as best he could, though still getting cut, until he got what he deemed close enough. Stopping, he then focused more of his chakra into his wakizashi, before slashing both at Ryugen. Issen, flash, shouted the rookie, an arc of chakra coming from each of his blades, catching the brunette off guard, allowing one of the tendrils to be cut off, the wire inside the blade being severed. Ha! Didn't think I could do that, did you? Taunted the samurai, before being forced to dodge an attack. What have you done? Screamed the young brunette, wildly attacking Meio without any semblance of technique. This is the sacred tool of Samui-sama, and you've broken it. Dodging for his life, the young samurai was grateful for his armor, as it took most of the damage, though he was hit several times, drawing blood. Quickly becoming exhausted, Meio decided to put all his power into one last attack. Stopping farther away than the tendrils reached, Meio sheathed one of his blades, focusing all the chakra he could into the other. He then bull rushed the boy, dodging and weaving the remaining two blades. When he was 5 yards away, however, he wasn't able to dodge as one of them pierced his hip. Argh. Well, you lasted longer than I thought you would, but it's time to finish this, stated Ryugen, dragging the samurai closer. This proved to be his downfall, however, as Meio poured all his chakra into one last attack. With the amount within the attack, as well as its proximity, the missing nin had no chance to dodge, and attempting to block with his new weapon only resulted in the destruction of the green crystal at the pommel, as well as the total obliteration of one of the remaining blades, with the last being broken just like the first one, as well as the shredding of his own body. I win, stated Meio, watching Ryugen bleed to death, before feeling the exhaustion of his own wounds and chakra usage, having just enough time to swallow a soldier pill and a couple of hemoglobin ones before he lost consciousness. Having passed out, Meio didn't notice the now destroyed sword disappear. Suiko vs Kendai. Smash. Dodging once again, the senior samurai couldn't help but be annoyed by the fact that his chakra was slowly being absorbed by that damned armor. Give it up, Samurai-san. You cannot make it past my armor, came the statement from the giant of a man. Issei. Kendai fired off another attack, only for it to once again be absorbed into the armor. Pathetic. No one can get past my infinity armor, no one. Your attacks are useless against it, shouted Suiko, before going off on a tangent about how no attack could get past his defense if they used chakra, talking on, and on, and on, and on. As the man continued his monologue, Kendai simply rushed forwards once more, but instead of cutting the artisan ninja, he buried his wakizashi into the giant's skull, directly into his left eye socket. Word of advice: armor only works if everything is covered. Oh, and don't yammer during a battle, it makes you look pretentious, stated the senior samurai, as he withdrew his wakizashi from Suiko's skull, wiped it off on the man's clothing, sheathed it, and walked off in search of his comrades, eventually finding Meio and dragging him back to town. Dumbass, muttered Kendai under his breath as he left Suiko behind in the clearing, not noticing the armor disappearing from the corpse behind him. Naruto, Mifune, and Hoki. Walking away from the almost brutalized corpse of Kajaku, the only female member of the celestial group cut in several pieces, the two swords completely destroyed as well, the green crystal in the hilt of the one cut in half. The two swordsmen, on the other hand, were walking away from the battle, without a scratch, not even winded. Mifune had simply told Naruto to hang back, before proceeding to decimate the woman, because while her equipment was exceptional, she was not. The two quickly made their way to what seemed to be a temple carved directly into the side of a cliff. The two of them weren't sure why Hoki was there, but with his eyes, Naruto could sense the man, and Naruto's eyes didn't lie. On the way, Mifune filled Naruto in on what exactly Hoki had stolen, as well as what it did. Finally arriving at the temple gates, they were shocked to see the symbol of the hidden artisan village pretty much everywhere, with carvings of dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of different weapons, from the simple, to the complex, to the efficient, to the downright outrageous. Entering, they realized that they were in a large pillar-lined hall, all of it carved from the mountain, making it a combination of natural and man-made cave. Following the path of lit torches, they eventually came across Hoki, standing on an altar, using his fire sword to cut open a stone coffin. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked, without even turning to look at the two. "This is the resting place of the greatest artisan to ever live, and the founder of our village, Samui. He was the sole reason that all of the other villages sought to destroy or absorb our village, and the sole reason we're still independent. Using his weapons, we will resurrect him, and wage war on the Big Five. All shall pay for their transgressions against our home," shouted the man, before he finally turned around to face them. He had a slim face with a prominent jawline with a visible black line around his eyes and brown hair which was swept to the back. He wore a light beige-colored headband with the Takumi village insignia printed on, as well as a purple jacket. "Naruto-kun. I leave him to you. He is your opponent to defeat. I will not step in, unless you die," stated the samurai leader as he moved back to watch the fight, much to the derision of Hoki. "You're joking me, right? You're sending a child to try and kill me? Don't make me fucking laugh. Your master must hate you, brat," shouted Hoki, brandishing the fire sword, sending a ball of flame at the boy. Seeing this, Naruto quickly rolled to his left, behind a pillar, allowing him time to think. Though he did so quickly, as the artisan had begun to tend a torrent of flames at the pillar, attempting to incinerate him. "All right." Mifune-sensei said that he was the best shinobi in the artisan village, but that's all he is, an artisan turned shinobi. He's a fully grown man, and I'm just a kid, so he has me outclassed in probably everything except kenjutsu, and maybe speed. I'm a smaller target, so that should help, but that damn sword makes him really hard to fight head-on. I'm definitely going to have to pull out all the stops here. Finished the blonde, before his eyes began to glow red, waiting for the sea of flames to disappear. Eventually doing so, Naruto then darted around the mostly molten pillar, heading straight towards the brunette man, weaving in and out of the pillars, hoping to catch Hoki off guard from where he was still standing next to the half-molten coffin. As he approached, Naruto was forced to stop several times, the fire making it difficult to proceed. During a break in fire blasts, no doubt to allow Hoki to conserve energy, Naruto actually managed to make it to the top of the altar, finally bringing the fight to the artisan. As he got there, the man began the altercation with a diagonal downward swing, which was sidestepped by Naruto, though the fire was not. Though slightly burned, and with a small fire having caught at the base of his shirt, Naruto tried a rising slash, which was also sidestepped. This went on for around 30 seconds, each trying to lay a hit on the other, Naruto's skill and speed allowing him to dodge Hoki's attacks, the man's experience and age allowing him to do the same. Though Naruto was continuously barraged by fire, burning him slightly, though his regeneration quickly fixed that. Eventually, one of them managed to land a solid hit, that one being Naruto, that solid hit being in the form of a slash across the stomach. Seeing this, Hoki then decided to exterminate the eyesore and his teacher once and for all. "Ha! You truly believe you can defeat me? Come to me, tools of Samui-sama. Infinity armor, Garyan sword, and weaknessless soaring short swords!" screamed Hoki, as he was engulfed by a pillar of light. When the pillar disappeared, it was revealed that Hoki was now wearing the infinity armor, which apparently had the Garyan sword on the back, with one of the WSS in his left hand. It wasn't long, however, until he noticed that something wasn't right. Looking at the blade in his left hand, he realized that it was nothing more than a stump, the sword having been cut in half at the guard. He then looked at the tendrils of the Garyan sword, and realized that they were nowhere near as long as they were supposed to be, with the ends cracked and broken, with wire trailing down. "What? How, we," stammered Hoki, unable to comprehend that the sacred weapons of Takumi's founder were destroyed. "Arrgh!" screamed the man to the heavens, throwing away the WSS's handle, and tearing the armor and Garyan blade away from his body, unable to realize that the armor was perfectly fine in his anger. "You bastards! I will annihilate you! How dare you destroy Samui-sama's tools?" With that, he completely flooded the area with fire, forcing Naruto behind another pillar, though he was still burned by the pure heat of the flames, the pillar burning him as well. When it stopped, Naruto was already healing from the burns, though it happened slowly. Staying behind the pillar, Naruto was caught off guard as the fire sword began to cut its way through whatever was left of said pillar. Rolling away, Hoki was revealed, constantly expelling fire in an attempt to charbroil the boy. It was only because of his eyes that Naruto survived. Though, after a while, his vision began to blur, as it tended to do, considering that his ability caused rather significant stress on his eyes. He was always fine after a while, but it usually took several hours for his vision to completely correct itself. Eventually, Naruto noticed that the fire was getting weaker, going from melting the pillars, to causing them to glow from heat, to not even that. That was when he realized that it was a beat-the-clock challenge between Hoki's chakra and Naruto's eyes. As it turned out, Hoki's chakra won. After dodging a particularly large fireball, Naruto's vision swam, causing him to stumble, which was instantly capitalized on by the artisan shinobi in the form of a downward chop. Realizing the danger, Naruto did the only thing he could, which was to bring his sword up to combat Hoki's, which turned out to be a bad idea, as it began to melt through the katana, eventually breaking through. While the fire sword did miss the boy, neither the fire, nor the broken-off blade did so, burning the boy, as the metal sank into Naruto's right thigh, forcing him onto all fours, the handle of a katana with around 8 inches of blade still on it. Chuckling to himself, Hoki then began to circle the whiskered boy, striking him with the flat of the blade whenever he tried to rise. "Do you see now? How useless this fight is. I am going to make you pay for what you did to my master's tools. But, I'll make it quick, I have a lot of work to do to fix this mess." With that said, Hoki stopped as he was directly behind Naruto, forcing the blonde onto his knees, as he stared over his shoulder. In position, the artisan shinobi raised his sword, before fire began to gather around the blade, glowing a brilliant white. As the sword came down, no one realized that Naruto's eyes began to flicker red. "Die!" screamed Hoki, slashing at Naruto, who, with the burst of what he assumed to be adrenaline, barely got out of the way in time, though he was still cut from his left hip to his right shoulder. A wound which was instantly cauterized. The blade in his thigh was also knocked out, but not before opening even further, creating a rather ugly gash. "No. No, 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 no," screamed Naruto in his head, before turning to Hoki, pure hatred beyond anything he had ever felt, burning in his eyes. "What's that old adage? Scars on the back are a swordsman's shame? Then again, if you had just died, you wouldn't have that, now would you?" asked Hoki condescendingly, before an insane grin stretched across his face. Not even bothering to respond, Naruto brought up what was left of his katana, intent on finishing the fight one way or another, his eyes turning red, not only glowing, as they usually do, but turning a demonic bloody red, with a vertical slit pupil, as he reactivated his Kekkei Genkai. The boy then rushed towards Hoki at speeds that the man could just barely keep up with, slashing at the artisan with a broken-off sword, slashing his stomach, only to disappear when he tried to retaliate. Hoki then felt a searing pain in his left arm, before it fell uselessly to his side, him not even being able to feel it anymore, seeing Naruto appear in front of him again. After that, came a pain in his ribs, the boy going even faster, not even allowing Hoki time to retaliate. After several more hits, the artisan then remembered the abilities of his sword, and proceeded to drown the area in fire, believing that that would destroy the child, only for another attack to hit him, this time in the exact same way that Naruto had been scarred, from his left hip, to his right shoulder. The pain then caused him to arch his back, to which Naruto slashed him across his stomach, forcing Hoki to cradle his abdomen with his only functioning arm, before he was slashed behind the knees, all the while seeing Naruto move, but being unable to do anything about it. As he fell to a sitting position, the ninja watched as the small swordsman approached him, eyes now only glowing red, the underlying irises having changed back to blue. "You know, if you had cut an arm off, maybe a leg, I wouldn't have really cared. But you struck my back, and for that, I must destroy you. Maybe somewhere else, I could have bought your swords," Naruto told him, locking eyes. As the boy approached, Hoki tried one last time to decapitate the blonde, only to realize that he couldn't move. Genjutsu was the last thing he ever thought, before Naruto shoved the sheared katana up through Hoki's throat, and into his brain. It was at that point that he remembered that Smith, the one who had asked him how many people he had killed. He realized that the man was right, he was ashamed to have ever picked up a sword. But then, he remembered the first time he did so was the day he met Mifune. The man had become a teacher to him in nearly everything. He answered every question truthfully, and had never steered away from a question due to Naruto's age. He would need to talk to the man soon, to discuss this event, his first kill, but for now, he was content. But the thought of his age brought up another. What was he? He was not an adult, but neither could he call himself a child any longer. He wasn't sure what he was, but again, he would have to bring that up with Mifune at a later date. Leaving his destroyed katana where it was as his now dead opponent fell, Naruto glanced over, before painfully reaching down, and picking up the fire sword. "It's bad luck to loot a body, Kouhai," came the remark from Mifune, who had watched the entire thing, saddened at the loss of his student's honor as the man cut into his back. knowing that people would either think Naruto a coward or an incompetent, and feeling intrigued by the boy's sudden increase in power. "A reminder of my failure," remarked the boy, reaching up with his left hand, feeling the top edge of his first and only scar. "And that, Samui-chan, is how I got my fire sword," said Naruto, finishing the story he had been telling in a cafe over the course of their breakfast, both of them in the outfits they met in, except that Naruto was completely unarmed, and Samui had her new tanto strapped to the small of her back, instead of the old one. That kind of goes without saying, but that's beside the point. "That is a fascinating story. And you beat him when you were only 10 years old?" "Yeah. To be fair, most of the man's power came from the fact that he wielded such a powerful sword. Most of his training was to improve his skills at making weapons, rather than using them. I had been training in chakra and kenjutsu for years, as well as the abilities of my eyes, which were pretty much the only reason I won." Afterwards, we went back to the leader of the village, got our swords at a discount, and we left. And when we got back to Tetsu no Kuni, I began to train my eyes as well, said Naruto, rubbing his shoulder, feeling the knot at the top of the scar on his back. "I see. Well, it was cool of you to tell me that story, Naruto-kun," responded Samui, before she pulled out a small scroll. "By the way, I got you something nice, as a thank you for my new tanto," the blonde woman told him, handing over the scroll. "Thank you, Samui-chan. But you didn't need to give me anything. I gave you the tanto because I felt bad I beat you, and I destroyed your old one," mused the whiskered male, unfurling the scroll, revealing a storage seal. Activating it, a set of Kumagakure shinobi gloves and shin guards popped out. Said gloves were pure white, fingerless, one about 3/4 of the way up his forearms, and had 3 rather wide red lines on the back of the forearm, with a red circle on the back of the palm. The shin guards were much the same, being pure white with 3 red lines on the front, covering the entirety of the shin, ending just below the knee, and just above the ankle. Seeing this, Naruto smiled, immediately grabbing the gloves, and sliding them on. He then removed his sandals, slid the shin guards on, and replaced his sandals. Standing, he went through a few motions, a few punches, and a couple kicks. Sitting back down, he rapped his knuckles against the hardened red lines, gaining a satisfied smile as he felt them. "Thank you, Samui-chan. These are wonderful. I could probably stop a blade with these," he exclaimed, before finally looking at her again, only to see that she had a hand over her mouth, shaking with mirth as she tried not to laugh, letting out a giggle every now and then. What's so funny?" asked Naruto, feeling a little self-conscious, only for Samui to use her free hand to point behind him, where everyone else in the sushi joint was staring at him. "Oh, sorry everyone," he announced, the waiters and other patrons chuckling before going back to their business. "Well, Naruto-kun, I'm having a lot of fun, but I have to go. It's time for me to meet up with my team for training," she told him, getting up in order to leave. "You know, Samui-chan, if you don't mind, I'd actually like to meet your team," remarked Naruto, surprising his date, a thoughtful look appearing on her face. Maybe it is time for them to meet. They've all been wanting to do so since I showed up with my new tanto," she mused to herself, thinking back to when the other 3 on her team saw her new tanto, and pretty much immediately threatened to steal it. "All right, Naruto-kun. Let's go," she told him, earning a smile, as the man got up and put some money on the table. Following Samui, jumping along the rooftops, Naruto couldn't help but keep an eye on his surroundings. Doing so allowed him to see a rather attractive young woman attempting to flag him down. Realizing that he knew her, Naruto laid a hand on his lead's shoulder, prompting her to stop. "I'm sorry, Samui-chan, but I think my friend over there wants to talk to me for a bit," he told her, before dropping down and walking towards the woman. As Samui watched him speaking to the woman, she couldn't help but compare herself to this woman, as an uncomfortable feeling settled in her chest, too. "She's probably just a friend of his. I don't like him in that way or anything, I'm just trying to get him to stay in the village, so why do I feel like this?" she asked herself, watching Naruto and the woman animatedly speak to one another, smiling and laughing. After a minute or so long conversation, Naruto clasped his hand on her shoulder, Before waving goodbye and walking back towards Samui, the two of them continuing on their way to Samui's team's training ground. "So, Samui-chan, is there anything I should know about your team before I meet them?" he asked jokingly, Samui's silence slightly weirding him out, before she let out a heavy sigh. "They're all cool, but they're really strange. Just be ready for some oddities," she responded, mildly startling Naruto, who was beginning to have second thoughts about the event about to happen. Once again embarking on their journey, the two eventually left the village, heading further into the mountains. Finally, they came upon the same lake-surrounded, stone courtyard where the two of them first met. The only difference was that this time there were 3 people there, 2 of whom were lightly sparring, while the third, much larger person watched while moving around to a beat that only they could hear. The first of the group was the sensei, Kirabai. The man had dark skin and a muscular build, as well as white hair and a goatee. On his right shoulder, he had a tattoo of the kanji for iron, and on his left cheek, a tattoo in the shape of a bull's horn. He had oval-shaped sunglasses and a white-colored forehead protector. He also has his village's standard one-strap-over-one-shoulder flak jacket, a long, red rope belt tied around his waist, the standard Kumo hand and shin guards, shinobi sandals, and a white scarf around his neck. He carried 7 swords on his back, held there by a large block of gray metal. The next male was Omooi. He was also a dark-skinned Kumo-nin with short, spiky, white hair and dark eyes accentuated with lines curving upwards from the corners. His outfit consisted of an overlong shirt with a hood, with red bandage hand guards, Kumagakure shin guards, and a black forehead protector. He was currently wearing a thoughtful expression, apparently in deep contemplation and sucking on a lollipop. To finish it all off, he had a long sword on his back. The final member of the team was also the only other female, Kuro. She too had dark skin, but her hair was a startling shade of red, with her eyes being yellow. She was rather flat-chested, with a long, short-sleeved dress with frilly edges, 2 simple yellow earrings, fishnet stockings, thigh-high boots with white soles and a forehead protector which she wears like a bandana. Like Omooi, she carried a long sword on her back. "Who the fuck is this asshole?" shouted Karu, not recognizing him in his normal attire, as well as it having been over a week ago, with her focusing more on Samui. "This is Naruto-kun, the person I've been dating the past few weeks," answered Samui, startling the 3 of them, as they all thought they'd never get the chance to meet the mysterious blonde man. "Yo! So this is the stallion to your pony, I got see this, and see if he ain't phony," came the response from her large sensei, who was still moving around to whatever music only he could hear. "So this is the guy who's dating Samui-san. What if they start having sex, and he gets her pregnant, before he leaves her, forcing her to leave the shinobi forquem?" "Ow!" began Omooi, before he was smacked on the back of the head by his yellow-eyed teammate. "Shut up, Omooi. So, you're the fucker dating Samui?" she asked, poking the blonde man in the chest every few words, not noticing that she had asked the same question the lollipop lover had. "Yo, Jigger Jack, don't get all out of whack. What's up, Mr. 9? Me and Miss 2 doing fine. I wanna know why you're here, but first you can treat me to a beer. First I wanted you to meet, see if you could rap to the beat." "We!" screamed the large man, pumping his fist in the air with his index and pinky fingers extended. "What the hell do you mean, Mr. 9? asked Kuro. "Man, I wonder what it is with redheads and foul mouths?" questioned Naruto to himself, remembering the flute-wielding girl from that new auto village, whose team had tried to recruit him, and kill him after he refused, before realizing exactly what it was they were talking about. "Your sensei must have me confused with someone else," remarked the whiskered male, rubbing the back of his head nervously, causing Kuro to turn on her sensei. "The other 3 they're just watching the mayhem." "The name's Omooi, by the way. What's yours?" asked the whitehead suddenly, looking at Naruto appraisingly. "Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto," responded said person, shaking hands with his new acquaintance. "You must be rather good to beat Samui-san. May I ask for a spar?" asked Omooi, nodding his head at the katana on his back. "Sure. I'm not too sure about all out, but I'm pretty confident I could beat all 3 of you, if we all use just Kenjutsu," remarked Naruto, only to get a derisive snort from Kuro. "Yeah right, you fucker. You beating Samui was probably just a fluke, and giving her that little steak knife was just your way of weaseling out of a rematch," supposed Kaoru, wrapping her hand around the hilt of her own katana. "Jonin-sama?" asked Naruto, glancing over at Kirabai, who was looking at the four of them interestedly, no longer moving around, before he nodded, thinking something along the lines of either he beats them all, and they're humbled, or they win, and he gives them one hell of a workout, considering how good Samui said the boy was. "Sure, whatever you say, little man. But know that swords are all that's in the plan. If you use something else, I'll put you through a living hell." He told the four of them, before everyone took up positions for a match, with Kirabai in the middle, with Naruto on his left, and his three students on his right. "You all ready, Photius? I don't want you to give death a kiss," he asked, everyone nodding, each of B's student taking out their blades, before they all glanced at Naruto, who pulled out two katana, both looking exactly the same, before he put them in his sash at his left hip, and drew the blades. With that, Kirabai quickly chopped his hand down, before jumping away to watch the match. When it started, Kuro wasted no time, quickly charging the blonde man, intent on finishing this quickly with an overhead swing, aimed at splitting Naruto in half, though she'd tone it down so that he'd just have a scar on his front from collarbone to happy trail. What she wasn't expecting, was for Naruto to block said overhead swing, with seemingly no more effort than it took to lift his arm. "Is that all? I'm going to have to hold back even more than I was if that's the case," taunted the blonde, enraging Kaoru, who withdrew the blade, jumping back to join her teammates, knowing that her anger was a problem, and barely able to do anything about it. Naruto was then forced to jump away, as Omooi blurred into existence on his left, slashing at the back of the blonde man's neck. Naruto then crossed his hands over his chest, attempting to strike at Omooi with both blades, only for the white-haired boy to bend backwards, almost losing his balance. It was at that point that Samui came with another strike, aiming for Naruto's back, to which he spun around, using his momentum to knock her strike out of the way with the sword in his right hand, while simultaneously balancing on his left foot, and kicking Omooi away with his right. Following through, Naruto used the blade in his left to slash at Kaoru, forcing her to break off her attack. Samui then appeared above the blonde man in a jumping slash aimed at his head, which was easily sidestepped. Jumping back, Naruto made sure that all three of his opponents were in his line of sight, because while he was sure that he could take them all on, he didn't want to take any chances by getting surrounded. That being said, the three of them began to advance on the blonde, trying to do exactly that, surround him, only for him to back up, until he couldn't anymore. 5 feet from the edge, the Whisker Teen then surprised the Chunin by charging Samui, who was directly in front of him. After a brief struggle, Naruto spun around, stabbing one sword in the ground to block a low swipe from Kuro's sword, using the other to block Omoi's strike at his ribs, before donkey kicking Samui in the ribs when she tried to take advantage. "Oh. Omoi-san, there's something on your face," Naruto told the white-haired boy, before taking his hand off the hilt of the blade stabbed into the ground, and punching Omoi in the nose. It was pain. 3. Did he seriously just say that? Came the question from inside Kiribai's head, getting a shrug in response. After he had been punched in the face, Omoi recoiled, freeing up Naruto's right hand, allowing him to slash at Kaoru, driving her away. This freed up Naruto completely to block another swing from Samui. Having finally had enough, Naruto decided to go on the offensive, starting with a downward flower swing, directed at Samui, forcing her to retreat, except that Naruto continued on her tail the entire time. Eventually, her back met the edge, and she was forced to attempt to block, which she did successfully, but only with one of the katana. Naruto's second katana broke her defenses, allowing him to land a blow, cutting her left shoulder. Sensing someone behind him, Naruto then whipped around, to deflect yet another downward swing from Kaoru, before rolling out of the way, aiming for Omoi. Seeing that he was thoroughly trouncing the three of them at the same time, Kuro and Samui nodded to one another, and began to attack Naruto in tandem from behind as he attacked Omoi. This led to Naruto spinning like a top, using both his swords, as well as his superior skill to attack Omoi and block Samui and Kuro's attacks, as Omoi backpedaled. Eventually, Naruto managed to knock Omoi's katana out of the way, leaving him vulnerable, Shichi to immediate advantage of, using the momentum of his spinning. Stabbing one of his blades into the ground, Naruto then used it as a pivot to hoist his body into a flying spin kick, striking Omoi directly in the face once more, completely knocking him out, before his own momentum carried him further, dragging the blade out of the courtyard floor, where he landed next to the now unconscious boy, entering another combat stance, both blades held in a reverse grip, facing the two girls, Samui on his left, Kuro on his right. Rushing the two of them, Naruto made a series of fast attacks, aimed at seemingly random parts of their bodies, quickly swinging at them, and just as quickly withdrawing his blades when they made contact, the strength behind his attacks jarring Kuro and Samui, and making them worry for their weapons, even with Samui's vastly superior equipment. Flipping the katana in his right hand into a normal grip on the backswing of one of his attacks, he used it to block one of Kuro's attacks, before sliding his blade around hers, so that they locked together by their pommels. Naruto savagely jerked the blade out of her hand, before using the pommel of his still reversed blade to crack her in the temple, knocking her down. He then ducked as Samui swung at his spine, stabbing one of his katana into the shoulder of Kuro's shirt, pinning her down and taking her out of the fight. He then rolled to his left, grabbing Omoi's katana from where it had dropped, and assuming yet another combat stance, this time with both katana held in a normal grip, with his right hand behind his head, the blade pointing down, and his left hand at the right side of his waist, wrapped around his body as though he were about to draw it. He then stood there, waiting, watching, as the only opponent he had left stood across from him. The two of them then blurred once again into action, Naruto easily overpowering Samui, blocking every one of her hits, dealing glancing cuts to her exposed flesh. Eventually, Samui simply had to admit defeat, as neither she nor her team had even bruised the man. "Enough, I forfeit," she stated, sheathing her tanto. With that, Naruto was declared the winner, with Omoi and Samui being given first aid, Naruto sealing his katana away, and giving back Omoi's. "You're pretty good, Naruto-kun. But, how is it that I managed to land a hit on you when it was one-on-one, but when it was the three of us, you were untouchable?" asked Samui, as Naruto checked Omoi to make sure he hadn't done anything permanent. He hadn't, but the white-haired boy would wake up with one hell of a headache. "I'm better with two," stated Naruto simply, but before he could elaborate, he was interrupted by the three sensei. "You was pretty good against my three, what do you say to be against me?" questioned Kirabai, as they got Omoi situated so he was laying comfortably on his back, the other two sitting on the steps leading up to the next cliff with Naruto and Kirabai, nursing their bruises and cuts. "I would honestly love to, but I don't feel like I'd be any match against you. To be honest, you're second on my list," remarked Naruto, confusing the three who were still conscious. "What the fuck do you mean, list, jackass? You don't actually think you're going to kill Sensei, do you, you fucktard?" demanded Karu, grabbing the handle of her katana again, determined to protect her sensei, even if he didn't need it. "No such thing, I assure you. I simply mean the list of who to be the best." "You're number two," stated the blonde nervously, trying to fend off the angry redhead. "Who's number one?" questioned Samui, while Kirabai tried to figure out whether to be offended or not. "Hoshigaki Kisame," responded Naruto, shaking his new friends to the core. However, before they could respond, Naruto stood, and brushed imaginary dust off of his lap, before sealing away his katana and adjusting his clothing. "Now, I'm sorry to say, Samui-chan, but I'm going to have to put off tomorrow's date. I have to leave the village for a while." "Well, that's not cool. Why do you need to do that?" she asked, concerned as to why he had to leave. "That woman I was talking to, the one on the way here? She's the friend of a friend who's an informant, and she told me that Momochi Zabuza was spotted in Nami no Kuni, and I wanted to fight him," said the blonde mill, before he was grabbed by the collar by Kara. "Are you fucking mental? You want to fight Hoshigaki Kisame, Momochi Zabuza, and Kirabai-sensei? I mean, maybe you could beat Zabuza, but sensei? He'll tear you a dozen new assholes in less time than it takes to say octopus. If you want to die that much, then just eat an explosive tag or something. What the fuck is wrong with you? How in the hell are you that stupid?" "Answer me, you blonde motherfucker!" screamed the redhead, as she started shaking her blonde captive, only for Samui to slap her hands away, causing Naruto to fall to the ground dizzily. "Stop it, Karu. If he wants to fight Kirobai-sensei, then I'm sure that he'll take it easy on Naruto-kun," she reprimanded, before kneeling down to examine her boyfriend. "Are you alright, Naruto-kun? It wasn't all that cool of Kuro to shake you," she stated, picking up the blonde, and placing him on his feet. "Well, I gotta go. I'll make that date up to you when I get back, Samui-chan," Naruto told the group after shaking himself a little to clear the cobwebs, and then disappeared in a blur of speed, making his way towards Nami no Kuni. Leaving the village, Naruto couldn't help but think as to exactly why he had stayed in Kumo for so long. He had been there over a month, but he had never been anywhere else except for Tetsu no Kuni, and Konoha before that, for longer than a week. Sure, there were several great swordsmen within the village, but he had yet to face a single one, only having sparred with Samui and her team during that time. Naruto had never really met anyone like the blonde girl, being one of the most stoic people he had ever met, and yet she was also one of the most expressive. Thinking about her, Naruto was unable to draw any conclusions as to what their relationship was. They both had said that they didn't want a relationship, but they kept going on dates. Did she really want a relationship? Was she just mooching off him? Was she trying to keep him in Kuma for some reason? He was really going to have to speak to her when he got back. Wait, why did he have to go back? Sure, he had told Samui that he would, but other than that, why should he go back? Sure, there were several people he could spar with, maybe take their swords as trophies, but he could also go to Konoha and see if Gekko Hayate or that infamous cat Anbu would like a spar. Sure, he could date a pretty girl in Samui, but he could hire a prostitute in literally any other village. Well, he could if he was able to stoop that low. He could improve his skills in Kumo against people like Daru, but then again, he could test his skills against people like Rokuso Aoi or Courier Kushimaru, and earn money at the same time. Truth be told, there were just as many reasons to go back to Kumo as there were to not go back. If he were completely honest with himself, then the only real factor would be whether or not to uphold his promise with Samui, to go back for at least one more date, before going back to wandering. Then there was the promise he had made Mifune, the one to come back every now and again, so that the man could judge his skills, so that his sensei would finally acknowledge his abilities, so that the two of them could simply talk, catch up, get shit-faced and maybe destroy a couple of things by accident. But Samui. She was, as cliché as it sounded, unlike any girl he had ever met. She was smart, she was level-headed, and a great kunoichi. She was also rather good with a blade, something that was a turn-on for him. The only reason she wasn't able to hold her own against him was due to the fact that she was a kunoichi first, forcing her to divide her time between working with her team, learning new jutsu, missions, control, and various other things. He, on the other hand, had focused on 4 things, and only those 4 things since he was 4, chakra control, kenjutsu, his dojutsu, and fuinjutsu, and he had only really trained his eyes after his fight against Hoki. If he was honest with himself, he wanted to start a relationship with the blonde, he just couldn't, as well as the fact that she said she didn't want to, though he did wonder whether or not she was lying about that. He felt that it just wouldn't be fair to any woman, if he started a relationship, only to leave. Okay, there is no way that I'm in love with this girl I've known for about a month. I might be attracted to her, but there's no way that it's love at this point, that'd be too easy. I guess that it could become as such, but I don't want it to. I just want to collect my swords. I'm sure that Mifune-sama would tell me to go for it though. Damn it, I'm just going in circles with this. I need to focus on my journey, and the battle ahead of me. He mused as he went. Eventually snapping out of his thoughts, it took him a few seconds to realize where he was, which turned out to be Fire County, as he was completely out of the mountains, and into heavy forest lands, which surprised him, as it was actually rather dark, meaning that he had traveled for a very long time. Seeing this, Naruto decided to call it a night. Upon reaching this decision, the blonde man activated his eyes, searching for any sign of foreign chakra. Doing so, he immediately found a few signatures. Seeing this, he began to sneak through the woods towards them, trying to get closer so that the penetrative abilities of his eyes could see who they were. "Come out, we know you're there," came a woman's voice from the camp, the speaker staring into the woods in his direction. Sighing, Naruto abandoned stealth, simply walking through the woods, into the line of a fire, coming across what he assumed to be a Chunin team. If the fact that 3 of them looked very young, and the fact that they all had a Konoha Hittite were any indication. "Who are you?" demanded their sensei, a woman with red eyes with what looked like a few extra rings, long, wavy black hair, and a dress that looked to be made out of bandages with a thorny plant stem pattern, and a single red sleeve, with her Hittite adorning her forehead. As he emerged from the woods, the woman quickly brought her hands together, presumably to make hand signs, positioning herself between Naruto and the 3 kids. "It's more polite to introduce yourself before asking the name of someone else, isn't it?" asked Naruto smugly as he leaned against a tree at the edge of the clearing, earning a roll of the eyes for the overused response. "I don't see how that's any of your business," she stated heatedly, going through 3 hand signs when he failed to respond, instead staring at her charges for a few seconds. The first Chunin was a boy who had shaggy brown hair, black slit-like pupils with no irises, red fang-shaped tattoos on his cheeks, and was for some reason wearing a fur-lined winter coat with a small dog perched on top of his head. To finish off, he was also wearing his leaf Hittite on his forehead. The next one was the only female member, had blue hair, white pupilless eyes, a fur-lined lavender jacket, and was wearing her Hittite around her neck. Currently her eyes had a rather hard edge to them that looked out of place on her extremely nervous features, as well as bulging veins, signifying an activated Byakugan. Naruto did notice that as soon as he had entered the clearing, she had begun shaking, before hiding behind her teammate with the dog, and while she shook less, it was easy for Naruto to notice her trembling, seemingly gaining strength from the boy. The last Chunin was also a male, with black sunglasses, slightly gravity-defying brown hair, a large gray coat with a collar up covering everything up to his nose, who wearing his Hittite on his forehead, much like the others on his team. "The name's Naruto," stated Naruto with a smile after a while, uncaring about her glare for the lack of information. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, examining the man's equipment, especially a certain piece. "Where did you get that flak jacket, Naruto-san?" "It was given to me by a friend of mine," responded Naruto, running a finger along the edge of the armor piece. "As to what I'm doing here, I'm just trying to get to Nami no Kuni. I was going to set up camp, when I sensed you guys, and came to investigate." "Well, if that's the case, then why don't you go there? Right now?" she asked, Naruto being able to tell that she was completely serious, and ready to try and kill him at a moment's notice. "I'm just trying to find a place to stay the night. I promise not to bring you to any harm," Naruto told the group of 4. "I don't care what you promise, leave," demanded the Jonin, getting shocked looks from her team at how cold she was acting. "Smart woman." "BB but sensei, his chakra isn't FL fluctuating. He's telling the dr truth," stuttered the girl, who Naruto guessed was a Hyuga. Nice girl, but she obviously had no real confidence if the fact that she was literally using her male teammate as a human shield, combined with her constant trembling. "I concur." "Why?" "Because my Kikaiku say the same thing," came the monotone from the boy with the sunglasses. Naruto paused for a second, before reaching into his hair, pulling out an insect, and gently shooing it away, earning a raised eyebrow from said preteen. Yip. Akamaru likes him," shouted the boy with the dog on his head, the dog nodding in acknowledgement. "Again, I don't care. Now leave," responded Guranai, finishing her jutsu, but not activating it yet, allowing the blonde man to raise his hands and surrender. All right, I'll leave. Have a nice day," the blonde told the red-eyed woman, before jumping back into the trees. "What was that about, sensei?" questioned the loud boy, wondering why his teacher was so mean to a man they had never met. "You 3 are naive. Everyone who isn't a Konoha shinobi is a potential enemy when on a mission, regardless of whether it's a D, C, B, A, or S rank. Remember that. Hinata. Keep an eye on him, and tell me when he's out of sight. When the 3 of you are on watch, make sure that you tell me if you sense this Naruto, so that I can take care of him," she ordered. This was all unnecessary, however, as Naruto quickly made his way a few dozen miles away to make camp after making sure that no one was around. As Naruto entered Nami no Kuni the next day, he began his search discreetly within the town. Sure, he would have been able to find any chakra signatures if he used his eyes, but he didn't want to become too reliant on them. In fact, he had actually pushed his self-allocated allowance for usage the previous night, searching for enemies. Walking around, he couldn't help but notice the pure squalor these people lived in. Grown men and women sitting on the corners, holding signs that said "We'll work for food," the women dressing rather loosely, though whether that was to garner more job opportunities, or by accident, he wasn't sure. Children wandered the streets, without shoes, with ribs that stuck out when you could see them, everyone wearing clothing that might have fit them if they were average-sized, rather than skinny. Others simply lay in random places, apparently having given up, waiting for the Shinigami to take them. Fleeing from the depressing scene, Naruto entered a store, before seeing a pink-haired girl accompanying a man who smelled of alcohol, even with Naruto 10 yards away. While this may not have been of note, except for the fact that she had pink hair, seriously, who the hell has pink hair? The fact that she had a Konoha Hittite made things interesting. The old man was gray-haired, bespectacled person with a large beard and dark eyes. Currently, he wore a sleeveless V-neck shirt with an obi, pants and a pair of sandals. He also carried a towel around his neck and wore a pointed hat on his head. The girl had bright pink hair, large green eyes, and fair skin. She wore a red cheapao dress with white circular designs, tight dark green shorts, and her Hittite was worn as a hairband. So, I meet another team. And so soon, too. I wonder who the sensei to this group is. After all, it was rather interesting to meet the Sakaku no Ijin, illusion mistress, Yuhi Kurenai. Thought the blonde, as he hid to watch the two, though he mused that he probably didn't even need to do that, since neither she nor the old man seemed to even notice their surroundings. Or not. Shaking his head as the man who had apparently tried to steal the girl's bag, only to accidentally grope her ass, was sent flying, Naruto followed the two of them as they bought what was left of the store. Following them, Naruto was treated to the sight of the girl giving a small child a handful of candies, but not before almost killing said child, thinking they were another pervert. He then overheard the duo speaking of how the bridge the old man was apparently building was a symbol of courage, how it was going to restore the hope and economy of the town, how everything would go back to normal when it was finished. Well, that's rather foolish. I mean, even if you build this bridge, there's nothing stopping that guy from blowing it straight to hell with a few well-placed explosions. Plus, you're only building this bridge because of some prick with a bank account. If you're as good a bridge builder as you say you are, then you should have done this years ago, thought Naruto to himself, before realizing that his quarry was getting away. They eventually led him out of the village, into a forested area, following the beach. Finally, the three of them made it to a rather quaint little, two-story house, which was literally built over the water on stilts. Seeing the pink one and the old man go into the house, Naruto waited for a few seconds, before, against his better judgment, activating his eyes, trying to sense whether or not he knew anyone inside. Instantly recognizing one, though for some reason he seemed somewhat off, the blonde immediately began to make plan to mess with his friend. Using his phenomenal natural stealth, something that he had never really trained, though was always good at for some reason, he quickly snuck into the building from an open window on the second story. Using his eyes to make sure that he wasn't surprised, he snuck his way downstairs in order to prevent himself from accidentally stepping on a loose floorboard. Now, one might wonder as to why one trained as a samurai would know a shinobi technique. It was completely commonplace for them to do so. Though samurai only used their chakra in conjunction with their swords, they still had to have adequate control over it, as if they didn't, they wouldn't be able to enhance their swords for very long. Sneaking downstairs, wondering how the hell his friend hadn't caught him yet, he quickly glanced around a corner, seeing a total of 6 people in the room at his back. 2 of them were the old man and the pink girl, but then there was a very attractive young black-haired woman, a man with one eye covered in gravity-defying silver hair who was lying on a futon on the floor, and a pair of black-haired boys, one of whom had a ridiculous haircut, a blue shirt, and white pants, the other of whom had hair that lay flat, and a shirt that bared both his midriff as well as his left arm. It was worth noting that for some reason, the 2 boys were covered in grass stains and bruises. Well, if today's training is any indication, then I'm sure that we'll be ready for when Zabuza and the fake hunter Nin comes back. Kakashi told everyone present, giving them all a nice smile. I wouldn't be too sure about that. Inu-san, stated Naruto, as he blurred into the room, crouching behind the silverette, a tanto held to the man's throat. "What?" screamed the man in his head, two of the three Chunin and both civilians panicking, before he recognized the voice. "Naruto?" he questioned, getting a warm chuckle, as the blade was taken away. "Damn, Inu, you've gotten rustier than hell. What happened?" inquired Naruto, the others wondering what was happening, and why the guy hadn't killed them all yet. "Naruto, what the hell are you doing here?" questioned Inu, wondering if he had been somehow added to Gato's payroll. "Oh, not much. I heard that Momochi Zabuza was here, and decided to come and see if I could beat him. I saw your Junon in the village, and when I realized that she was your student, I decided to mess with you a bit. I haven't seen you in what, a year?" asked Naruto, walking around the futon to sit on the couch, before seeing the man nod. "The name's Kakashi, by the way. I haven't been Anbu for about 6 months now." The now labeled Kakashi told Naruto, earning a nod from the blonde. "Sensei, who the hell is this guy?" demanded the girl suddenly, standing between Naruto and the old man with a kunai pointing at the blonde, glancing between him and her teacher. "Oh right, time for introductions," cheered Kakashi uncharacteristically. "This is Uchiha Sasuke, the Junon with the funny haircut, Haruno Sakura, Pinky, Sai, the pale one with the hooker shirt, our client Tazuna." The man took a drink, his daughter Tsunami, the woman bowed, and Inari, "but he's not here right now." Bowing back to Tsunami, and nodding to the Junon, Naruto then made his way over to Tazuna, and stuck out his hand for a shake. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Tatooine," spouted Naruto, everyone looking at him like he had grown a second head, wondering how he could have gotten the man's name that wrong. "My name is Tazuna," came the annoyed grumble from the drunken architect. "That's what I said, Toblerone," replied Naruto cheerfully, only for the man to gain an annoyed expression and a tick on his forehead. "Tazuna," he replied heatedly. "Right, Tamagotchi," said Naruto just as cheerfully as the last time. "My name is Tazuna," screamed Tazuna, gripping Naruto's hand as hard as he could, though it had no effect on the blonde. "George, what the—" "Anyways," interrupted Kakashi, making Naruto inwardly pout that his fun had been ruined. "This is Uzumaki Naruto. We traveled together for a year." "No, you followed me because you were told to by your Hokage," stated Naruto, glaring lightly at his friend who just chuckled nervously. "Right," acquiesced Kakashi with a rather nervous smile. "How did you know it was me?" "Oh, I'm sorry, Inu must have been one of the other 1,000 lanky bastards with silver hair which points directly up that I know." "So what happened to you guys?" asked the blonde swordsman, before listening to the story of how they had met and fought off Zabuza, and how the man was more than likely still alive. Hearing this, Naruto then got off the couch, before his eyes and hands began to glow at the same time, his eyes red, and his hands green. "I didn't know you could use medical jutsu," commented Kakashi, surprised that the swordsman would ever learn a shinobi technique, other than chakra control exercises and chakra flow with his weapons. After all, he himself had offered to teach Naruto several times, but the blonde stoically maintained that all he wanted to learn was the blade. "Only one I've ever learned, and I still can't do it without using my eyes to visually regulate the chakra flow." "Damn. You're in shit condition. That explains why I was able to sneak up on you," the blonde told the man, who nodded, as he had been wondering why the teen's eyes were activated, having seen them hundreds of times when they were companions, knowing everything that they could do. When Naruto was finished, Kakashi quickly stood up, feeling much better than he had done for a while. "In any case, this little meeting has changed things," said the silverette to his Junon, Naruto getting a bad feeling in his gut. "Considering the circumstances, I'm going to change your training a little bit," finished the shinobi teacher, stretching the kinks out of his spine, the civilians and Junon flinching slightly whenever a particularly loud pop was heard. "What do you mean you're changing our training, sensei?" demanded Sakura, her sentiment being shared by Sasuke, Sai, and Naruto, the last of whom knew that no matter what they did, no fresh Junon could train enough to beat a Jonin in less than a week. "Well, Sakura-chan, Naruto and I are going to," began Kakashi, only to be interrupted by said blonde. "What the hell do you mean, Naruto and I?" demanded the swordsman, pissed at the fact that Kakashi would instantly assume that Naruto would do whatever he asked. "Come on, Naruto-kun," drawled Kakashi playfully, giving the teenager one of his patented eye smiles. "You owe me after I rescued you from that castle in Kubi no Kubi, Land of Neck," stated Kakashi, recalling how the two of them had been trapped inside a chameleon transformed into a castle. "No, you told me that we were even when I got you that one night stand with that petite girl from Shimo no Kuni, Land of Frost," responded Naruto near instantaneously. "Well, what about when I fought off Ringo Amayuri in Chano Kuni, Land of Tea, the one who tried to keep you locked in a closet so she could have her way with you whenever she wanted?" inquired the Konoha Jonin, reminding the blonde of the rather hilarious altercation with the Mizugakure missing shinobi, involving lots of alcohol, an attempt to take the Kiba swords from her, and a lot of torn clothing. "The tall woman in Kawa no Kuni, Land of Rivers," replied Naruto, again without hesitation. "I got you out of those ruins in Kaze no Kuni, Land of Wind." Another adventure where Naruto searched for a weapon in some ancient ruins, thinking that an ancient shinobi might have left a weapon behind, only to find a series of kunai that Naruto didn't recognize, but Kakashi did, too. "The twins in Oni no Kuni, Land of Demons," interrupted Naruto, earning another round of shocked looks. "Then, that mother and daughter in Tanama no Kuni, Land of Valleys," the blonde boy once again interrupted the silverette, whose shoulders immediately sank in defeat, before he perked up once again. "Look Kakashi, you traveled with me for a year by orders of your Hokage. I may not have wanted you there at the start, but I'd like to assume that we're friends now. I've paid every debt I owed you, and vice versa. The two of us are currently even. Now, because we're friends, if you want me to help you beat the hell out of these rookies, then I'll gladly do so, and you'll owe me another favor. But if you assume that I'm just going to go through with everything that you tell me to, then we're going to have a problem. Now, if you want to ask me, I'll tell you whether or not I will help you. If you don't, then I'm leaving to try to find Zabuza," Naruto told the man. Seeing that Kakashi was not going to argue any longer, the blonde turned his attention back to the rest of the people in the room. Raising a water bottle to his lips, he paused in surprise at the expressions on everyone there. Tazuna was raising his bottle of sake in Kakashi's direction. Before he downed it in one go, Sasuke was looking rather green, with Sakura and Tsunami switching between glaring at Naruto and glaring at Kakashi, all while Sai simply smiled the same creepy smile that he'd had the entire time Naruto had seen him. "Alright, Naruto-kun. Would you be able to help me train my Genin?" asked Kakashi with a sigh. "Wait just a damn second, sensei. What the hell was this guy talking about with all those girls? You shouldn't lead on a woman if you're just going to leave her," shouted Sakura, a sentiment visibly shared with Tsunami, though it also hit home with Naruto, considering his situation with Samui. "Not important," Naruto assured Sakura, waving off her concerns flippantly. "Very well, Kakashi, I'll help you. But, I'm only doing this because you're my friend. Anyone else, and I'd tell them to fuck off," came the finished deadpan from Naruto, earning an eye smile from the Cyclops. "Wonderful. Now, I've been training the three of them in the tree walking exercise," began Kakashi, before Naruto interrupted yet again. "Wait, you're on your first C-rank mission, and you're just now teaching that to these greenhorns? You are a terrible teacher," inflected Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura glaring at the Cyclops. "Well, either that, or they're terrible students," added the blonde as an afterthought, the glares immediately shifting towards him. Ignoring the blonde's comments, Kakashi motioned for the Genin and Naruto to follow him. As they left the house, the Jonin filled Naruto in on everything that he might need to know in order to help train his students. Watching the five of them leave, Tazuna couldn't help but think about what a great wingman the blonde apparently was, making a plan to go drinking with him at some point. "Alright, the three of you will be sparring with Naruto here. As both he and Zabuza use swords, it'll allow you to learn some techniques to handle him," explained Kakashi as the small group arrived at the forest clearing. "That is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. No matter how good these brats are, they aren't going to be able to fend off Momochi Zabuza, even if they trained every second of every minute between now and when they next see him," said the blonde with a groan, even as he pulled out one of his regular katana. Was his friend trying to kill these kids? Perhaps, perhaps not. I simply wish to give them some experience fighting an enemy who wields something other than kunai and shuriken," retorted Kakashi. "Very well, but I still don't think it's going to help." "And how would you know that? You're just a civilian, and we're shinobi," taunted Sasuke smugly, as Sakura sighed dreamily and Sai just examined Naruto, trying to gauge his abilities. "In that case, you can be first, Sasuke-kun," said Kakashi cheerfully, the boy getting up as Sakura cheered him on. Thinking that the man would never be able to keep up with a shinobi, Sasuke rushed Naruto as fast as he could. Smack! Only for Naruto to viciously backhand the Ravenette, sending him tumbling to the ground. "Was that it?" questioned the blonde, Sasuke snarling at the swordsman, before pulling out a kunai. Seeing this, Naruto quickly drew his blade, shifting into a Chunin stance, his feet spread evenly, the hilt at his pelvis, with the point of the blade aimed at Sasuke's throat. With that, the boy once again rushed Naruto, lunging with a kunai, only for Naruto to use his blade to gently guide Sasuke's lunge to his right, before gently putting the edge of his katana on the back of Sasuke's neck. Dead. Sasuke then tried to slash at Naruto from the position they were in, only for Naruto to jump back. The Uchiha then threw his kunai at the swordsman. Seeing this, Naruto stabbed his sword through the ring at the base of the kunai, and launched it back at Sasuke, who crouched to avoid it, only to be pinned down as Naruto stood behind him, holding his sword vertically with the tip between Sasuke's shoulder blades, ready to stab down. Dead. As Naruto removed the tip of his katana, Sasuke jumped away, going through several hand signs, before finishing on Tora. Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu, Fire Style, Grand Fireball Jutsu. With that, the Uchiha quickly spewed a large torrent of flames, hoping to eradicate the annoying blonde, who was somehow humiliating him. On the sidelines, Sakura was completely speechless as she watched the best Shin'an of their graduating class be completely manhandled. Kakashi was shaking his head in slight disappointment at how easily the boy was losing his temper, and Sai. After the fire had cleared, there was nothing, no body, no ashes, nothing but a charred patch of grass. Wondering where he had gone, Sasuke was unprepared as Naruto dropped onto his back from above, sending him into blissful unconsciousness. Dead. Came the callous remark from Naruto as he stepped off the Shin'an, sheathing his sword. "Well, that's that. Sakura, your turn," drawled Kakashi, hoping this would teach the Uchiha some humility, while he dragged the boy over to the sidelines. As Sakura got into position, she watched as Naruto pulled his katana from its sheath once more, grinning at her in a feral manner as he did so, eyes narrowed dangerously, and promptly passed out, foaming at the mouth. "Well, that was unexpected," murmured Naruto, sheathing his sword, before checking on the girl with Kakashi. "She's fine, just unconscious." "Sai, you're up," said Kakashi as he dragged Sakura back over to the sidelines. Sai lasted longer than the others, because as soon as the match started, he disappeared. "Smart boy. Retreating from the obviously superior enemy in order to attack from afar," thought Naruto, before he quickly unsheathed his blade and cut 4 lions in half with it, only for them to fall apart into puddles of ink. "That's a new one." Naruto then began to systematically destroy more and more creations, and with the novelty of ink jutsu having worn off after the first attack, this was rather boring to the blonde, who began to try and figure out Sai's location. After a couple dozen seconds, Naruto was able to see the tree canopy shifting in one particular location. Realizing this, he quickly sent an underpowered Ise flash at that spot, forcing Sai to flee the area with Naruto hot on his tail. While the boy was fast, he was no match against Naruto, who quickly caught up. "Not bad, but let's see how good you are with that Tanto," Naruto told Sai with a grin, as the boy pulled out his tipless blade. Playing a defensive game, Naruto was able to see that Sai was actually very good, wielding his Tanto in his right hand, and a kunai in his left. It was obvious that he either had years of training, or innate talent. Judging by the complex way that the boy was trying to disarm him, he would guess the former. Finally, Naruto eventually got bored with the fight, dodging one of the Tanto swipes, and hitting Sai on the back of the neck with the blunt edge of his katana, only for the boy to melt into ink. "Fuck!" shouted Naruto internally, as the ink attempted to crawl its way up his body in a shackle-like manner. Frowning, Naruto broke out with brute force, before appearing behind the real Sai in a flash of speed, knocking the boy out before he could complete whatever attack he had planned. "We have a lot of work to do," said Naruto with a chuckle, as he stared at the three unconscious Chunin in front of him, Kakashi only sighing, knowing it would be pointless to ask Naruto to take it easy on them. Over the next few days, Naruto would spar with the Chunin while Kakashi guarded Tazuna. Each day he would beat the hell out of them, heal them, and do it all over again. The three of them were understandably curious as to why his eyes glowed, but he refused to tell them anything about it, which they eventually just accepted. A surprise happened, however, as one night Sasuke snapped at the boy Inari, before storming out of the house in a rage. The next morning, he was almost serene, and he had actually begun to treat his comrades with some manner of decency, as though actively trying to be pleasant. He was still a dick to Naruto, but it was still a rather large step forwards. Nobody knew what happened in that time, but they all suspected the rather attractive person Sai told them about, who had been walking away from a blushing Sasuke. 3. Though he was only doing so because of Kakashi, Naruto began to give the three advice to help them improve, increasing their speed and reaction time, allowing him to go harder and harder against them, and while he didn't even use half of his abilities against them, they had improved dramatically. Finally, the day came where Kakashi figured that Zabuza had had enough time to recuperate. Leaving Sai behind to guard Tsunami and Inari, the other 5 of the group made their way to the bridge, only to be greeted with the scene of the bridge workers laying in puddles of blood, dead, dying, and unconscious. Well, that's rather coincidental. Or is it convenient? The first day we decide we're ready for him, he appears. Thought Naruto with the absurdity of the situation, before a choking mist blanketed the area. Look who we have here. Tell me, Kakashi, did that ink brat decide to cop out? Taunted Zabuza. Actually, I'm just an old friend, come to visit. Now, would you be so kind as to hand over your sword? Asked Naruto politely, a laugh coming from Zabuza at the mere thought. Tell you what, Gaki, you kill me, and you can have it, laughed Zabuza, as he hefted his blade, Kubi Kiribocho, the Sever Sword, the executioner's blade, the Naruto. Take care of the apprentice, shouted Kakashi, following Zabuza to do battle. Son of a bitch! Screamed Naruto, distinctly remembering that he'd told Kakashi that he wanted Zabuza, not the Hunter Nin. I guess this is the part where we kill each other? I must do as my master has ordered me. Came the monotone from the face hunter ninja, as they pulled out several senbon. Kinky, joked Naruto. What? Stammered Naruto's enemy, before throwing a few easily dodged needles. I'm a boy, you moron. So Zabuza-san swings that way? Teased Naruto again, his opponent visibly getting angrier, before they suddenly did a complete 180, becoming calm and collected once again. I'm sorry, Samurai-san, but I'm going to have to kill you now, stated the masked enemy, as several mirrors made of ice came from nowhere, surrounding the blonde swordsman, each one having the same pose, his left hand up next to the ice user's face, with the senbon in each finger gap of the fist, for a total of 4, the other hand hanging limp at the fake hunter Nin's side. Seeing this, Naruto immediately activated his dojutsu, glancing at the several different mirrors, seeing which one had Zabuza's apprentice. When he saw which one had the enemy in it, he quickly took out the fire sword, and cut the mirror in half. As it fell apart, the ice user was revealed, the arm that had been at his side cut off, with his spine being the only thing holding the rest of him together. Lying on his stomach, the mask fell off the fake nin's face, revealing one of the most beautiful people Naruto had ever seen. Though he knew that the enemy was a male, it was slightly hard to remember when looking at his face. How? Asked the fake hunter shinobi weakly, the light leaving his eyes rather quickly, each of his other mirrors breaking in a beautiful display of crystallized water. This sword is capable of generating near infinite amounts of fire. I just used enough to get the job done. Now rest. Rest knowing that you died doing your duty. Explained Naruto, before kneeling down, picking up the mask, and closing his enemy's eyes with his fingers, noticing that he was smiling at what Naruto had said. I wonder what his name was. Thought Naruto to himself, before taking off towards where he felt the most chakra being expelled. Arriving, Naruto quickly came across Kakashi, who had his left eye uncovered, and currently had a scroll out, which he was whipping around his head. Seeing this, Naruto sent a blast of fire at the silverette, burning the scroll, and forcing him away from the area. Oh? That's interesting. Is there dissension in the ranks? Mocked Zabuza, whose voice came from both everywhere, and nowhere from within the mist. Naruto, what the fuck are you doing? Demanded Kakashi, wondering if Gato had somehow gotten Naruto under his payroll, even after all the blonde had done for Kakashi and his Chunin over the last few days. I told you, Kakashi, that Zabuza was mine, yet you stuck me with the brat. Now, piss off and let me handle this, demanded Naruto, as he tossed the mask at Kakashi's feet, sealed away his fire sword, and instead pulling out a pair of near-identical slate-gray ones, reminiscent of cleavers. These blades were little over 3.5 feet long, with the 2.5-foot-long blade that had a width of 18 inches, and a thickness of half an inch. The two edges were completely parallel, before a perfect 40-degree angle going to a point, which was a 90-degree angle. They had curved hilt that did not extend past the blade itself, with a foot-long handle, with a large ring at the end, reminiscent of a kunai. Linked to those rings was a chain which extended back up to the hilt. The reason why they were nearly identical was due to the fact that the flat of each blade had what appeared to be veins going the length of the sword. 4. How do you like my stone swords, Zabuza-san? These were given to me by Jiraiya the Sennin himself, from the Mount Myaboku, the realm of the toads. I'm not exactly sure why he gave them to me, but that's beside the point. 5. You're the first person I've ever used these against, is the point. Trailed off the blonde, a sweat drop appearing on both Kakashi and Zabuza's heads. Naruto then shifted his grip so that he was holding the swords by the bottom of the hilt, the heel of his hand against the ring at the base, before swinging them in little arcs, going faster and faster, the arcs getting larger and larger, as he went. Interesting. If the fact that he beat Haku is any indication, he's proficient in swordplay. I'm going to have to finish this quickly, catch him off guard. I can beat Kakashi at any point, especially now that this Gaki stopped whatever he had been planning on doing, so I'll focus on the fresh one for now, thought Mizu's former demon, as he made his way behind Naruto, whose movements had stopped progressing after a certain point, now simply swinging back and forth at a constant rate and distance. Now behind Naruto, Zabuza tried to quickly end the battle with a broad sweeping attack, believing that Naruto wouldn't notice him in time to stop what amounted to his swinging an entirely other person. This train of thought went completely out the window, however, as Naruto bent over, spinning around so that he was limboing beneath the sword swing, before kicking the flat of the giant blade, forcing it into the open air on Zabuza's left, before using the momentum from his spin to score a hit on Zabuza's chest, cutting off the harness that the demon used to hold up his Zanbato. 6. Fuck, shouted the missing nin, as he once again disappeared into the mist. Naruto, you can't beat him, he's too strong, shouted Kakashi. If we're going to get through this, then we need to work together. Before Naruto was able to respond, and not in a good way, the sound of rushing water reached their ears, before they saw a dragon made of water barreling towards them. As Kakashi jumped away, Naruto simply stood there, before channeling chakra into the sword in his right hand, before backhanding the dragon with the flat of the blade, dispelling it. Though the water still impacted him, it was nowhere near the force it would have been, had he not. That kinda hurt, but it should have really affected Zabuza's morale, seeing a high-level attack like that dispelled so easily. Thought Naruto to himself, unknowingly hitting the nail right on the head. Fuck. If he destroyed my jutsu that easily, I don't know if I have a chance here. Wait. That boy, he attacked Kakashi. That means they aren't allies. So, if I attack him, then the blonde won't do anything about it. With that in mind, Zabuza quickly turned his attention to the enemy he saw as the weaker option, hoping that he'd either take out the copy ninja, or the blonde would be distracted enough for him to get a lucky hit in. Approaching Kakashi, the mist demon smiled viciously, as he once again prepared to bisect the silverette. It was not to be, however, as his target somehow heard the sound of the blade cutting through the air, and rolled forward to dodge. Kakashi then tried to perform another jutsu, hoping to end the confrontation, only to be sent flying by a kick to the ribs, courtesy of Naruto, aggravating the already existing wound on his chest. I told you, Kakashi, he's mine, shouted the blonde, before he rushed Zabuza once again, this time channeling chakra to his limbs, his strikes becoming faster and stronger, as well as his swords, becoming more dense, increasing the momentum of his attacks. Zabuza following suit, as he was unable to do anything else because of the viciousness of the blonde's assault. The two fought it out for several minutes, the mist clearing due to the two's concentration being solely on their fight, blade clashing against blade, wounds being opened on both, each one attempting to bisect the other with the sheer force behind their strikes. While Naruto did have the advantage of two swords, Zabuza had more experience, and his sword was much heavier, allowing him to strike harder. Eventually, the fight came down to stamina, and while Naruto had that in spades, he was unused to swinging such heavy blades, usually only wielding smaller, lighter katana, and though Zabuza had significantly less than Naruto, he only had one blade, which he was much more used to using. Finally, Zabuza broke through Naruto's defenses, sending the stone blade in his left hand flying away. Immediately capitalizing on this, Zabuza tried to cut Naruto in half from crown to foot, only for the blonde to surprise him by rushing forward. Instead of being cut in half, the blunt half-circle at the base of Kubi Karabocho caught him on his left shoulder, breaking his clavicle, scapula, and his humerus, as well as fracturing some of his vertebrae. 7. However, this self-destructive action surprised the demon enough that he was able to shove his remaining stone blade through the man's torso, the two of them face to face, both coughing up blood. "Hey, a fitting death," whispered Zabuza, before the light left his eyes and he slumped to the ground. Dead. 8. With that, Naruto sealed away the stone blade still in his grasp, picked up Zabuza's sword with his only remaining good hand, and stumbled his way towards his other sword, before awkwardly picking it up with the same hand he had Kubi Karabocho in, and sealing it away as well. "I'm going to have to make a few new seals if I keep getting such large swords," thought the blonde, before a twinge of pain from his left shoulder sent him to the ground. Fuck. The adrenaline from the fight is wearing off. If I don't get some attention soon, I'm going to pass out. Naruto was out of luck, however, as the sound of slow clapping came from the unfinished part of the bridge. Looking there, it was revealed to be a small man in an expensive-looking suit, surrounded by an army of generic thugs. "Well, damn if that wasn't interesting. I suppose I'll have to thank you for killing that itty-bitty demon. Saves me the hassle of killing him myself. Bandits are so much cheaper anyways. Regardless, now that you're all tired out, I'm going to have to ask you to die," shouted the businessman to himself. "Kakashi. This is going to be up to you," said Naruto, whose vision was fading due to the blood loss and pain. "I might be able to kill some of them, but I'm really fucked up here." "Don't worry, Naruto. I'm nearly full after you stopped me from participating in the battle. Plus, Sasuke and Sakura are full because they guarded Tazuna-san. We'll take care of these guys," responded Kakashi, before yelling for Sasuke to join the two of them, breaking off the boys staring at the smiling face of the fake hunter Nin. What followed after was nothing short of slaughter. Though Kakashi decimated most of the bandits, Naruto was still able to get in a few kills with his new sword, even fighting through the pain, as Sasuke also took some lives, mostly with his fire jutsu and thrown weapons, but he still did it. After it was finished, the only one left was Gato, the survivors having left him behind in their bid for life. "Please. I'll give you anything, money, women, land. Just let me live," screamed the short man, before he was put out of his misery by a kunai to the brain, courtesy of Kakashi. Seeing that everything was now calm, Naruto swung Kubi Karabocho to rid it of the blood, and couldn't help but grin, seeing as he had defeated number 17 on his list, as well as taken possession of the legendary blade. Having finished his business in Nami, he disappeared in order to recuperate, before heading back towards Kumo to have a conversation with the woman he'd been dating. Due to his having vanished, he missed the large crowd of villagers appearing on the scene, led by Tsunami of all people, with Sai next to her, and Inari behind her. Wave Country. 1 week later. With Gato, Zabuza and his apprentice dead, the town quickly gained hope once more, as all the men in the town that were able came to aid in the bridge's construction. It took several more days to finish, and was named the Bridge of the Blades, when it was. Seeing as how Naruto had disappeared after the battle on the bridge, the Konoha team had buried Zabuza and his apprentice, at the behest of Sasuke, surprisingly enough. As the four shinobi stood there at the graves one last time before they left, Sasuke couldn't help but think of the interaction he'd had with the fake hunter Nin, the one that only he knew as Haku, The one morning after training. You told me that to be strong you had to protect those precious to you. You told me that true strength comes from the love you have for others, but where did that strength take you? A grave. You were wrong, and I was right. The only path to true strength comes from hatred, from revenge, from solitude. One doesn't need friends, only more training, more jutsu, more power. I will kill my brother, and anyone who gets in my way. And I'll start by killing Uzumaki Naruto. He will be my stepping stone to my brother, the benchmark that shows I can defeat that man. Thought the Avenger darkly, as he activated his Sharingan, gained from the emotional anguish of ending so many lives. After a few seconds of prayer, Kakashi stuck a katana that he had bought at the head of Zabuza's grave to mark it as that of a swordsman, and they all walked away. Midnight that day. Approaching the hill where the two shinobi were buried, a figure stopped momentarily to appreciate the view of the small fishing community in the moonlight. That being done, they quickly ascended the hill, making sure that they hadn't been followed, before unsealing a shovel, and digging up the grave marked the porcelain mask. So, you want to be the best swordsman ever? Then I'll show you the best swordsman ever, muttered the figure to itself, before dragging Haku's top half out of the dirt, and sealing it away, before disappearing, leaving behind nothing but a desecrated grave. Seeing that everything was now calm, Naruto swung Kubi Karabocho to rid it of the blood, and couldn't help but grin, seeing as he had defeated number 17 on his list, as well as taken possession of the legendary blade. Having finished his business in Nami, he disappeared in order to recuperate, before heading back towards Kumo to have a conversation with the woman he'd been dating. And I'll start by killing Uzumaki Naruto. He will be my stepping stone to my brother, the benchmark to show that I can defeat that man. So, you want to be the best swordsman ever? Then I'll show you the best swordsman ever. Reappearing in a secluded area of the forest, Naruto immediately collapsed from the pain of his injuries. "Fuck!" screamed the blonde as just moving caused blackness to encroach his vision. Laying down as comfortably as he could, he activated his eyes, raising his right arm delicately so as not to aggravate them, and began to examine himself. Broken scapula, clavicle and humerus, 7 broken ribs, 3 cracked, 2 cracked vertebrae, and I don't even want to know what I've bruised. How the hell am I still conscious? Asked Naruto to himself, as he healed as much damage as he could before he lost to his flagging adrenaline, and the quickly approaching darkness, as well as before it happened. It had happened about 4, maybe 5 times in his life. He had fought, and fought, and fought, and when he was finished, he was in more pain than he had ever been in his life. He was crawling on the ground in agony, almost begging for it to end, before it just disappeared. The pain didn't fade, or lessen, it just completely disappeared, replaced by an interesting feeling that he was pretty certain that a junkie would only feel once in their lifetime with the best high ever, as he went completely numb. Each time, the sensation was more powerful, as he went each time from a complete hell, to something even morphine couldn't compete with. Trust me, he knew. Why do I get the feeling that this is not a good week for me? Wondered Naruto to himself, his thoughts slurring, his body completely relaxing, before his eyes became glassy, his mouth slightly open. Were anyone to pass by him, they would think him either simple or on something. About 5 minutes later, he was found, and dragged away. And that's the end of the chapter. I really hope that you liked it. Please leave a no, I'm just kidding. Upon waking up, the first thing that Naruto noticed was the smell of frying vegetables. Turning to stare at where the smell was coming from, he found a young man, probably a few years older than he was, with a bald head, dark skin, wearing a pair of kimonos, one nearly skin-tight and black, with a more comfortable-looking, looser yellow one atop that, a pair of hakama pants, and finished off with a pair of simple sandals sitting on a log poking at a slightly smoking iron pan. Pushing off a thin blanket, Naruto unsealed a tanto, gave a brief prayer for forgiveness, snuck up behind the monk, before holding the blade to his throat. Who are you, and where are we?" he asked, the man stiffening up in surprise and slight fear. I apologize, my name is Zasalamel. I am a monk of the Lightning Temple in Kaminari no Kuni, Land of Thunder. I saw you on the side of the road several hours ago, and felt that you were in trouble of some kind," came the rather nervous reply of the now identified Zasalamel. "I tried to bandage your wounds, but I'm not very experienced in that sort of thing. I'm more of a book kind of person," he continued, Naruto noticing for the first time that he had bandages wrapped somewhat clumsily around his shoulder and chest. "My apologies, Zaslimal-san. On the road these days, you cannot be too careful. But, may I ask what a monk of Kaminari no Kuni is doing here?" asked the blonde as he put the blade back from whence it came, and sat next to the monk. "I am fine, really. But, to answer your question, I am actually just a Shugyoso, monk in training, on a pilgrimage. I was given one set of clothing, and have had to beg or gather on my own what little I have now," stated the bald monk with a nervous chuckle. "Kinda funny that he's from where I'm headed. And why is he so nervous?" wondered Naruto, before remembering that he had just held a blade to the man's throat not even 30 seconds ago, sweat dropping. "Oh, well, if you need supplies, then here," said the blonde, fishing out his wallet and pulling a rather large sum of money out of it, Zaslimal's eyes bulging at the sight of it. "I couldn't possibly take that amount. I am fine, I can simply do a few jobs here and there for what I need," said the monk, attempting, unsuccessfully, to give the money back. "It's no problem, Zaslimal-san. I'm happy to help you on your journey to enlightenment," replied Naruto casually as he stood up. "By the way, your vegetables are burning," finished the blonde, before he disappeared. "Oh no! My vegetables are burning. Wait, that guy was horribly injured. How is he up and about when he should still be unconscious? I wonder what his name was. My vegetables." Stopping a few hundred yards to the north, Naruto stopped in order to check his condition. "A few bruises, but that's about it. Man, that Bijou chakra is some really potent stuff," thought Naruto to himself, as he began to simply wander down the path. Walking down the path, Naruto, rather lost in thought, almost didn't notice the 8 figures following him, just barely knocking away the several senbon that had been tossed at him. "You people again?" demanded Naruto, seeing that the 8 people who had been shadowing him were familiar. Or at least, their clothes were. "That brat Sai must have ratted me out to the Danzo guy. Maybe I should have killed him when I had the chance," murmured Naruto to himself as 2 shinobi squads surrounded him. 6 males, 2 females, their demonic masks and half-shirts indicating their allegiance, as well as the kanji for root on their foreheads. "When will you people finally get the message? I'm not coming back to Konoha, and there's nothing you can do about it." "That may be, QB, but Danzo-sama no longer wishes you to serve him. We will simply be taking you back for the extraction of the bijou, to be implanted into a host more suitable to Danzo-sama's will," replied one that seemed to be a little younger than Naruto himself, maybe being 14, while the oldest of the group seemed to be in their early 20s. At that, 4 of the Anbu rushed Naruto, the rest hanging back to watch, drawing their weapons. Smart. They are trying to overwhelm me with numbers, or simply wear me down, allowing the other 4 to remain fresh, as well as to analyze my fighting style and abilities. Too bad for them it won't work," thought Naruto, as he brought out one of his more interesting swords. At a total of 4 feet, with a blade that was only 2 feet, with an equal handle, this sword was a nagamaki. Its sheath was stained a bright red, with the cloth wrapping the hilt the same color. The copper-colored tsuba was in the shape of a kanji for luck, with the same kanji appearing on the metal of the pommel. Whipping the sword in a broad arc, the sheath was flung from the blade, into the face of one of his attackers, shattering the mask, and causing lacerations to the man's face. This surprising act allowed him to close the distance between himself and the nearest enemy, a female if the physique was anything to go by. Right hand gripping just below the tsuba, and left hand gripping the pommel, Naruto then brought the nagamaki in a slash, tearing the woman's weapon, a tipless tanto, out of her grip, before bringing it back to slash her from left hip to the bottom of the right side of her ribs. The blonde then quickly blocked the swipe of another's root agent's tanto, the leverage afforded him by the weapon allowing him to easily overpower the larger man. He then twisted his sword, the tip making a circle motion, before bringing it up above his head, his enemy being forced to do the same, as Naruto blocked the strike of another's tanto. Immediately afterwards, the swordsman shoved the tanto away from himself, before rolling to avoid the shuriken and kunai thrown at him. "Deiko, this was not in our dossier for the nine-tailed beast," whispered one of the 4 not in battle. "I am aware of that fact. Perhaps we may bring new weapons and techniques to Danzo-sama for one of the core not from a clan. I have heard of them, but this is the first time I've ever seen one of these weapons," responded the captain of the group, not taking his eyes off the battle for a second. Naruto, at the moment, was using his Nagamaki to swing at the female of the group one more, his strikes barely being blocked, but as he was about to finish the woman off, the two of them were forced to jump apart, as a fireball came from the man whose mask had been destroyed. Seeing that both of their sight had been hampered, Naruto then threw his sword like a tomahawk at the last place he had seen his opponent, hearing the sound of flesh being pierced by metal barely a second later. One down. Naruto then brought out a tanto and a katana, blocking the downward swing of the man's own tipless tanto they all seemed to wield with the katana, before shoving his own dagger through the man's temple. Two down. With that, he then whipped the katana around, deflecting the thrown weapons from the last man with the mask. Naruto then jumped towards the maskless man, bringing down the katana in a helm strike, only to be blocked by the one with the mask. This allowed the Baronbu to complete another jutsu. This jutsu was one that went a large amount of water at Naruto, carpeting a good amount of the forest floor with an inch or two of the liquid. Dodging this, Naruto glanced at the ground wondering what this was going to do, before a massive jolt went up his spine, paralyzing him for a few seconds, forcing his body to turn. He saw that one of the four that had hung back had thrown a kunai with a wire attached to it into the water, and was sending a large amount of electricity down it if the yellow glow meant anything. With that, the other five that were still alive began encircling the blonde with ninja wire, none of it actually touching him to spare themselves from being electrocuted. Seeing this, Naruto did the first thing that came to his mind, and activated his eyes. Seeing the glow from Naruto's eyes, the root shinobi with the wire began to pump even more Raiden chakra, making sure not to kill Naruto. Feeling the increase in voltage, Naruto was barely able to cast a genjutsu, making it appear that he had somehow escaped and was on one of the tree branches. Using the genjutsu release technique and not seeing anything different, Naruto's opponents immediately dropped what they were doing to attack the image of Naruto, allowing him to recuperate, though it took a few seconds. Landing a hit on the fake Naruto, they realized that it wasn't Naruto when they weren't able to actually hit it, their weapons simply phasing through him. The surprise of this once again bought Naruto a few extra seconds to recover, as the captain who had tried to dispel the genjutsu was one of the best en route. Finally turning back to their target, one of them was too slow to dodge as Naruto decapitated him with his katana. 3 down. "Thank you Mifune-sensei," praised Naruto, remembering one of the first lessons that the old man had drummed into him, which was never drop the weapon. Eyes still activated, Naruto then drew another katana from his hate, blocking, deflecting, and redirecting attacks from 3 of his opponents, while the remaining 2 simply threw kunai and shuriken at him. And while Naruto had the advantage of expertise, his eyes, and reach, they had numbers and teamwork, a kind which was much better than that of Samui's team. Though that may have been because that was just a spar, and these people were actually trying to incapacitate him. Eventually, he figured that this stalemate was going to end in his loss, and decided to do something drastic. Flipping the katana in his left hand in a reverse style, with the blade facing the opposite direction it normally would, he continued to evade their attacks, waiting for the perfect opportunity. He didn't have to wait long, however, as the man whose mask he had broken went in for another power helm strike. Seeing this, Naruto quickly brought his left arm up, catching the blade of the tipless tanto on the red plates, and continuing the motion to slice the man's head in half, before immediately jumping and rolling in that direction, knocking the embedded tanto off his glove, nicking him slightly in the process, and ending up in a standing position facing his opponents. 4 down. "Teiko," yelled one of the shinobi that was left, seeing as half of their force had been neutralized, not wanting to fail the mission and by extension Danzo. Change of tactics, move to neutralize the 9-tailed beast, it should survive lethal attacks long enough to extract the bijou from the Jinchuriki, stated the commander, each of them now going through hand signs. Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu fire style, great fireball technique, shouted each of the shinobi, as the forest was flooded with fire, which Naruto barely escaped by jumping away, landing on a branch a few yards from the fire. Damn, that's a lot of fire. Though, I can't help but notice that some of them seem better at it than the others. That elemental affinity stuff really does wonders. remarked the blonde casually, waiting for the smoke and fire clear, and the four Rudanbu to attack him once again. Finally, the four of them appeared, one of them above, the other three surrounding him. Seeing this, Naruto fell onto his back, stabbing both of his swords into the wood, watching as the Tontos of the three clashed above him, before setting his hands on the branch above his shoulders, and thrusting himself into a handstand, tearing all three Tontos from the grips of their owners, and planting both feet into the face of the man above him, breaking his mask, and knocking him unconscious. 5 down. Once fully extended into a full handstand, Naruto, using chakra to grip the wood, and his own leg strength, he began to spin like a top, kicking the three remaining enemies away from himself, before springing up into a standing position, yanking both katanas out of the wood. He then rushed towards one of them, cutting him down while still in the air. 6 down. That done, Naruto landed upon a tree branch, before turning, and rushing towards the only other woman in the group. By this time, both of the remaining root members had once again regained their bearings, and were glancing around the battlefield. Seeing no other choice, the woman surreptitiously signaled to her captain, before rushing their target while he began to go through hand signs, something impossible to miss by Naruto. As the woman approached, Naruto struck out at her. Not even dodging, she tackled Naruto, holding him around the waist, applying chakra to hold her to the ground, and to keep a firm grip on the blonde, as her comrade swiped both of his hands at them, fingers extended and bent like claws. Eyes activated, Naruto could see that it was a wind jutsu, and immediately released his left katana, brought his arm around the woman's head, torquing it, snapping her spine, before jumping as high as he could like a high jumper, feeling the wind as it went beneath him, hearing as it tore through the tail of his kimono, and the sound of it tearing through his dropped blade. 7 down. Upon landing, Naruto used his left hand to tear the kimono off his body, throwing it at his last remaining opponent to blind him. Instantly knowing what Naruto was trying to do, the man rolled backwards to avoid being blinded by the kimono. He then clasped his hands together as he backpedaled, remembering his last conversation with his master. Capture the Kyubi Jinchuriki if you can, destroy it if you cannot. Futon, Repushu wind style, violent wind palm, shouted the man as he assumed a wide-legged stance, before he began to thrust both hands at Naruto over and over again, his jutsu tearing huge chunks out of trees when they missed the blonde Jinchuriki. Running in a huge circle around the man, Naruto once again cast a genjutsu. That done stopped, before running in the opposite direction as his opponent continued to aim at the fake Naruto. Waiting for his moment, he rushed forward not even a second later, as the root member's back was turned to him, and stabbing the man in the back, Naruto then violently twisted his sword and tore it from the man's body, making him bleed to death in seconds. 8 down. Standing still about 30 seconds to make sure there weren't any more enemies, Naruto finally collapsed, falling on his rear end for a few seconds to recuperate from the battle he was just in. Getting up, he resealed his katana, before picking up the body of the root man he had just killed, going over and laying him in the middle of the clearing created by the combined fireball. He then went around and did the same for all the others, with the exception of the woman killed by the wind jutsu, as her eviscerated corpse would serve no purpose to him. Tying up the unconscious man with rags mad from his kimono, hands smashed against elbows so he couldn't move if he woke up before Naruto was ready. The woman with his nagamaki was last, as he actually had to search for her for a bit due to the battle having made him lose his bearings slightly. Finding her, she was pinned to a tree with the blade about 2/3 of the way in. Pulling the nagamaki from the woman's body, she gave a light groan, earning a raised brow from Naruto. Still alive? Either this woman is extremely lucky and I missed anything vital, or Danzo's training really pays off and she dodged at the last second. I wonder which one it was. He mused to himself, healing the woman's wound so she wouldn't bleed to death, not noticing that doing so was speeding her reascent to consciousness, before tying her up as well, taking a scroll out of one of his pouches, and unfurling it to reveal an extremely intricate storage seal on the scroll. "Let's get started, shall we?" asked Naruto to the air, before biting his finger, and running it along the seal, the shadow covering his face and his grin making him seem completely insane. He then got to work. Several hours later, the last of the captured shinobi woke up to the smell of blood, laying on a metal slab. Noticing that he was only barely tied down, the Rudanbu tried to escape, only to find that he couldn't move any of his limbs. Realizing this, he attempted to ingest the cyanide held within the fake molar, only to notice that his mouth was forced open by something, and several of his teeth were missing. "It's useless to try to move, you know," came the voice of the target. "I've severed the ligaments in your shoulders, elbows, knees, and ankles, and then made sure you wouldn't bleed to death. I've also placed a seal on you that takes away your ability to utilize chakra." "Sorry about the teeth, I didn't know which one was the suicide one, so I had to fish around. After all, I wouldn't want you to die like your friend over there. I've also disabled the deadman switch that would normally destroy your body when you die. Took me a little while to figure it out. That timer is a killer," stated the blonde, still missing his kimono, who was standing at another, smaller metal table, upon which were a number of regular and vicious-looking medical tools, various sized brushes, and about a dozen bottles of ink. Currently, the swordsman was looking over a scroll, which he had filled out recently, if the light reflecting on the still wet ink was any indication. Next to that was another scroll, this one empty, most likely to write down anything the blonde learned in an interrogation. Turning to look over at where the target had been indicating, the root member saw that laying next to the rest of the squad, half of whom were smoldering corpses, was the one of the female members of the group, whose mouth was leaking small yellow bubbles. "Your friend over there died before I could examine her, but even in death, she gave up a lot of secrets, and so will you. I will never betray Danzo-sama." Forced out the assassin, only for Naruto to shake his head. "I have no interest in your master, his plans, his forces, or anything else. His Fuinjutsu, on the other hand, is rather fascinating. I never really got the chance to examine your guys' seals. The bodies of your comrades would usually burst into flames before I could. A body-destroying seal is a rather ingenious way of getting rid of evidence if I do say so myself. Danzo really knows his stuff." "Do you like your accommodations, by the way? It's a little setup I made after I killed that fat guy with that sound team so that I could study his cursed seal, or any others that I encountered, whenever and wherever I wanted." "What was his name?" "Jidanda? Not important," rambled Naruto, now examining the equipment on the table. "Take now, for instance, do you have any idea how hard would be for me to get medical supplies in the middle of a forest? I'd have to drag you to the nearest village with the appropriate facilities, and then bribe whoever was there, if possible, to allow me to do whatever I needed with you. With this, I could study all of your seals without needing to head to a city, or something." At this point, the blonde began to put on a set of surgical equipment, gloves which went to his elbows, a mask, an apron, the entire ensemble. "Of course, I can, and did, learn a lot from the bodies of your comrades, but chuckle, a live specimen is always the best," stated Naruto, his voice somewhat muffled behind his new apparel. With that, the blonde placed a scalpel behind his left ear, a syringe behind his right, put on a pair of glasses with a rather thick magnifying lens as the right socket, the left being completely empty, and grabbed a pair of forceps. Approaching the tied-up root onbu, he grabbed the man's tongue with the forceps and began to examine the seal with the magnifying lens. Now, the standard procedure for this, if you could call it that, is to have one Fuinjutsu expert, one mednin to keep the subject alive, and a third person to assure the subject's comfort, whether it's another mednin, or just a civilian anesthesiologist. Unfortunately for you, I can only do two of those things at once, and I need you alive, so I'd recommend you pass out soon," joked the blonde, before he grabbed the syringe behind his ear. As he approached Kumo, Naruto wondered what to do when he entered the village. He could visit Samui, but why? It was true, he liked her and wanted to see her, but he chalked it up to her being nice to be around, not even mentioning the fact that she was very easy on the eyes. But she had explicitly told him that she didn't want a relationship, which meant that either nothing would become of continuing to date her other than an empty wallet, or she was lying to him for some reason. But if she was lying, why? What possible recourse could she have to keep him in Kumo? Was she doing it for her village? Naruto might not have really minded, as it had happened before on one occasion, but he actually liked Samui. He considered her a friend, and maybe something more, if circumstance allowed it. But he couldn't think of that now. For the moment, he had to focus on his upcoming battle with Daru. Daru was a very laid-back individual. Don't get me wrong, he'd fuck you up if he needed to. A loyal shinobi to his village, he'd do whatever he had to do in order to fulfill his mission, whether that be heavy fighting, or heavy lifting. But the thing he most liked to do was those boring missions, such as guarding his cage, or guarding one of the supply depots in the village, or guarding the gates of the village, anything that allowed him to simply stand there, and maybe occasionally kick the shit out of someone. It was one such mission that Daru was returning to the day that he found a note pinned to the door of his apartment, requesting a spar at a secluded training ground. Well, isn't that, at least it won't be dull. Coming up to the training ground, Daru was surprised to see that a teenager was the one who wanted to fight him. Said teenager was sitting on a rock spire sticking up high over the training ground. Just as Daru was examining Naruto, so too was Naruto examining Daru. Daru was a fairly tall, dark-skinned man with a slightly bulbous nose, a lazy look in his eyes and shaggy, white hair which covered his left eye. He wore a high-collared, sleeveless uniform with loose-fitting pants, bandages on his wrists and the one strap over one shoulder flak jacket of a Kumagakure shinobi. Daru also had stylized characters for water and lightning, tattooed on his right and left shoulders respectively. "You must be Naruto." B-sama said you beat all three of his team at the same time. "Wouldn't shut up about it," drawled Daru lazily with a small smile on his face. "Well, then you know why I'm here, don't you, number 14? Asked the blonde with a mocking grin. 14? I don't know whether to thank you or cut you even more," mused Daru, somewhat to himself, but mostly to Naruto. "How about we go ahead and get started?" inquired Naruto, pulling out one of his katana. "Sounds fine to me, kid," responded Daru, pulling his cleaver off his back, only to be stopped by Naruto. "What do you say to making this a little more interesting, Daru-san?" questioned Naruto, intriguing his soon-to-be opponent. "A little sport. One katana each, no chakra, no jutsu, no hand-to-hand, just katana, and if I win, I get your sword," stated the blonde, earning a raised brow of Daru's. "And what do I get if I win?" questioned Daru, only to grin and nod when Naruto brought out Gubi Kiribocho. "All right then. Let us do this," shouted Naruto, as he slammed his hand on the ground, sealing away both of their chakra. "This is why this took 3 months to complete, this fucking fight. I had zero motivation for it, so eventually I just decided, fuck IT, I just won't show it. Maybe later, but not now." Walking through the doorway at the end of a long, medially lit corridor, the shadowed man came across a rather interesting sight. That of one of his minions wearing fake cat ears on one of those bands that are usually used to hold hair in place, sprawled on his back swatting at the dangling end of one of the chains holding their prisoner pinned to the wall, next to what could only be called a throne. Chains which were currently shaking due to the prisoner trying to force their way out. "I really wouldn't do that, prisoner-san, you might hurt something, and that's my job. Now, Ranga, what are you doing? Where did you get those ears, and where is Hone?" demanded the man, who was wearing a black cloak with a sheer veil at the face, obscuring it from view, but letting him see out. "I don't remember," stated Ranga, before he went silent for a while, making the cloaked man wonder which question he had answered, only for his minion to take off the ears, which were that of a pure black cat. "I saw a lady wearing them, and I thought, I like those, and then I had them. The lady was gone though," stated Ranga slowly, before he stood up with a slightly confused expression on his face. Standing up, however, revealed that the man was a behemoth. Standing at 7 foot tall, and the figure of a Greek god. For clothes he was wearing a pair of pure black tight pants, a sleeveless white tank top, and cloth wraps on his feet, revealing his toes. He had extremely short hair, less than half an inch long, which was dark brown, with pure green eyes. However, there did seem to be something wrong with the man as his eyes seemed to have a permanently dazed quality to them, as well as the noticeably sized dent on his left temple. "That's nice, Ranga, but what are you do? Never mind, where's Hone?" demanded the large man's boss slowly and patiently, knowing that this might take a while. "Hone said something about getting a tail, and left a few hours ago," stated the massive man, still staring confusedly at the fake cat ears in his hand. "You wouldn't happen to mean, getting some tail, would you?" asked the man with the cloak as he pulled a scroll from one of his pockets. As Ranga nodded vigorously, the leader sighed, before tossing the scroll to the large man. "Whatever, Put the body and the scroll into one of the tanks so it'll be preserved." He finished, before walking over to a room opposite the throne, with a steel door, and entering, a few kanji lighting up both when he entered, and when he left. "You got it, boss," shouted Ranga, before he walked to the entrance to one of the 3 corridors branching off of the room, one of them being the one his boss had come from, ending in another steel door, except this one didn't glow when it was opened, revealing a large 50-foot by 50-foot square room, the ceiling about 15 feet high, with the interior being a sterile white. Inside the room, was a vast array of various equipment, with one corner having the equipment of a forge, with the actual corner holding a rather large anvil, bellows, various tools, a large amount of wood, and a pile of metal bars, the area of which was stained black from the soot. Another corner seemed to be an apothecary, with rows of shelves covered in bowls of powders, stones, and insects, as well as jars of animals floating in fluids. The third corner was the farthest from the forge, and had an angled table, with scrolls and books on it around it, with an assortment of brushes, and the last corner, however, had 5 large tanks, each of which were of a size to hold a person, with a metal table with several medical tools, being similar to Naruto's own setup, only more elaborate, as well as another small shelf, holding a few dozen other jars of various sizes, with fluid, but nothing else in them. Heading directly towards the last of the 4 corners, he proceeded to unroll the scroll on the table, and unsealed whatever was inside, revealed to be the top half of Haku's corpse. He then opened the door to the far left tube, put Haku inside, shut the door, and proceeded to lock it. After that, he pushed a button, and watched as the tank filled with water, with Haku floating in the center. Finally, after that, Ranga left the room, only to realize that he was still holding something. A pair of fake cat ears on a band. "Why do I have these?" wondered Ranga, before throwing the cat ear barrette behind him, and proceeding back to the room with the prisoner. "Looks like you win, kid," stated the dark-skinned man, before pitching forward unconscious, several bleeding cuts lining both their bodies, the borrowed katana falling from Daru's fingers to land a few feet away. Finally, after a long grueling battle, Naruto stood victorious, Daru unconscious on the ground in front of him. Finally finished, the blonde swordsman returned his katana to their seals, as well as Kubi Karabocho, before walking over, and picking up the cleaver. "That was a really cool battle, Naruto-kun," came the familiar voice of Samui, whom had arrived about halfway through, after sensing his use of chakra to make the barrier, behind him. Hearing her, Naruto turned, and simply stared at her. As he wondered what to do. Several seconds later, still staring at the increasingly confused girl in front of him, Naruto made his decision. "Thank you, Samui-chan, but I must get going," he stated, walking over to scuff the seal out of existence. "What? Why?" asked the beautiful blonde, not understanding as to what was going on. "Well, I did what I came here to do. I fought some people, and got a new sword from it. I don't have any more reason to stay," he told her kindly, Samui simply looking at him beseechingly. Turning to leave, he hesitated, simply asking, "Or do I?" Finally all the tension in her body seemed to leave, her shoulders going limp, head simply hanging in defeat, the girl addressing the ground between them. "And no. I guess not." "I see. Goodbye, Samui-chan. It's been fun," stated Naruto as he began to walk away. But, before he left, he glanced at the folded cleaver in his hand, at the defeated man on the ground, at Samui, and the various shinobi around him who had arrived after feeling Daru's chakra disappear. After a few seconds, he sighed, tossed the cleaver away, and disappeared in a flash of speed. Detsu no Kuni. 3 days later, finally arriving at the office of General of the fortress, he saw the man, who looked the exact same as he did when Naruto had left, long silver hair, bandage-wrapped head, heavy wrinkles, with black eyes and a thin goatee. Currently, the general was wearing a kimono instead of his usual armor, and sitting at a small wooden table in a traditional way, on his ankles, his shins against the small rug upon the ground, a cup of tea in front of him. Upon sitting down in a like manner, neither Naruto or Mifune could stop their own little trip down memory lane. For Naruto, this was the man to whom he owed literally everything. This man had saved him from the hatred of Konoha. This man had saved his life on more than one occasion. This man had given him a roof over his head, taught him to read, had shown Naruto how to use a sword, how to use chakra itself. Not once had he ever lied to Naruto, even if the truth hurt the boy. The samurai leader had provided the blonde with a home, with friends, with a good start. He had shown Naruto the path to strength, the very value of his own existence. Yes, he had been a harsh taskmaster, never once allowing Naruto to become complacent, always being that one immovable object that he wanted to overcome, beating, cutting, and breaking Naruto's bones in the practice courts. Everything Naruto was now, was owed to this one man, Mifune. For Mifune, he could only see the small boy in the alley, the mistrusting little speck of humanity that a life on the streets had turned the boy into. He saw the bright flash of yellow that brought so much life to the rather dreary gray, black, and white existence that was Tetsuno Kuni, Land of Iron. Naruto had been the life of the fortress, always making someone laugh, always up to something, getting in trouble with other trainees, sparring with the seniors, and learning Fuinjutsu from one of the retirees with silver hair streaked with red whom had passed a few years back. He had taken the boy who had nothing but raw potential, and had molded him into a good sword wielder, and an even better man. At this point, Naruto was more a son to Mifune than a student. After a few minutes of silence, Naruto unsealed his newest acquisition, Kubikarabocho, and placed it upon a low table between them. Without a word from either of them, Mifune then grasped the hilt of the massive cleaver with one hand, and effortlessly hefted it, the blade pointing directly at the ceiling, the pommel almost touching the ground, though it never wavered, always the same distance from the floor. He then turned the blade horizontal, parallel to the ground, using his other hand to examine the simplistic blade, feeling the blunt back edge, examining the wall of the half-circle at the base, running his finger gently along what he could at the edge, simply showing his expertise. After a minute or two of silence, he nodded, and placed the sword back onto the table in the same spot that it was, before picking up his teacup as Naruto sealed the cleaver away. A few more seconds of silence later, and the two of them broke into smiles, though Mifune's was more conservative than Naruto's was. "How are you, Naruto-kun?" asked Mifune, eager to catch up with his wayward protege. "I am very well, thank you, sensei. I have much to speak of with you." "But how are you?" wondered Naruto, knowing that his sensei was not exactly a young man anymore. "I am very well, Naruto-kun, thank you for asking. It has been, 4 months, since I have seen you last?" questioned Mifune, earning a nod from his apprentice. "Yes, sensei. I apologize for not arriving sooner, but I had engagements which needed to be dealt with." "I understand. As you know, I too have a busy schedule," responded the silver-haired man as the two began to exchange pleasantries. "How are Meiyo-san, and Kentai-san?" asked Naruto, eager to see his closest friends within the order once again after a few minutes. "Kentai as well, but I'm afraid Meiyo is missing. He was on patrol, and the man he was with was killed," answered Mifune with a frown that was mirrored by Naruto. "Why would anyone wish to capture Meiyo-san?" wondered Naruto. Meiyo had only been a samurai for 6 years. It was long enough to gain enemies, but the samurai forces tried to generally stay neutral in everything they did. They simply didn't have enemies that extended past bandits or the occasional missing nin. "I do not know, but the area in which he went missing was heavily damaged by ninjutsu. They may have been at the wrong place at the wrong time, and come across a missing nin, or one of the villages is trying to break our neutrality. Either answer has a slew of problems for us to deal with. However, we cannot act before we have more information." "I understand, Mifune-sama," replied the blonde. "It's actually a good thing that you came when you did, Naruto-kun. I was invited to appear at the Chunin exams, and I would like you to come as my guard." "I would be honored, sensei, but why would you agree to go? You usually don't do so unless they're here," wondered Naruto, as it was true. Mifune was usually much too busy to attend anything that wasn't in Tetsuno Kuni's Land of Iron borders, and sometimes not even then. That journey to the village of Artisan was pretty much the only time he got out and about, and even that was a part of his duty, hoping to teach Naruto where the village got their weapons. The only other time Naruto could remember him leaving, was when he took a 12-year-old Naruto to one of the country's several mines, where he could see where the iron for their weapons came from. "It is about time for the Hokage and myself to negotiate a new trade agreement between our nations. It will most likely remain the same, but it is a necessary evil that I have done on several occasions. Normally, I would ask that the delegate come here, but it would simply be more efficient for me to go there with everything going on. There is also the fact that Hokage Dono is still somewhat sore about my taking you from Konoha. Still upset about the loss of his Jinchuriki? Naruto bitterly joked, not having forgiven the old man who was supposed to be the man to raise him, as according to Mifune all Jinchuriki had a deep connection to their cage. I understand your anger, Naruto-kun, but what happened in the past is best left in the past. You escaped Konoha's hatred before it could destroy you, and you have led a better life because of it. Admonished Mifune, Naruto hanging his head in shame, as he knew the old man was right. Yes, Mifune-sensei. I will try, but I do not know if I can forgive, stated the boy honestly. That is all I can ask, Naruto-kun. Now, tell me of how you came to be in possession of Kubikirabocho. Asked Mifune, smiling as Naruto launched himself into the story. Several minutes later. That is a most interesting set of events, Naruto-kun. But, is there anything else you'd like to tell me? Asked Mifune once Naruto had finished his story, only to be treated to something that he had never really seen before. A blushing Naruto. Well, I met a girl, said the blonde, rubbing one of his new gloves. That is a most interesting set of events, Naruto-kun. But, is there anything else you'd like to tell me? Asked Mifune once Naruto had finished his story, only to be treated to something that he had never really seen before. A blushing Naruto. Well, I met a girl, said the blonde, rubbing one of his new gloves. Oh? Questioned Mifune, a small smile on his face, as he gazed at his young apprentice. Has the wayward rogue finally been brought to his knees? He asked, internally smirking as Naruto began to grow even more red. It's the duty of the master to embarrass his student. Let's see how far I can take this. Tell me, should I be expecting little blonde ones to be running around? Should I be dusting off my ceremonial armor? Maybe you'd like to look at the housing market for some of the nearby villages? Inquired the aged samurai general, feeling an odd sense of joy at seeing his protege turning more and more red. No. We were just friends, shouted Naruto, slamming his hands on the table between them, before taking several deep breaths and leaning back in his seat. We did have some kind of relationship, but I'm not really sure as to what it was. He finished, rubbing his right hand over the notch on his left arm guard from the fight with the Rudanbu. How so? The general wanted to know, having heard previous stories from his young protege, from the one about Amayuri Ringo, to the one where a kunoichi had asked him to impregnate her so that her child would have his eyes. Naruto, it seemed, had some rather bad luck when it came to women. Well, for starters, her name is Samui. Came the response, as Naruto pulled out a picture from a pocket inside his kimono. Looking at it, Mifune was interested to see a beautiful young woman in a black t-shirt with blue jeans, wearing a somewhat confused, happy, and embarrassed expression on her face, sitting on Naruto's lap in what was obviously a photo booth, wearing blue jeans as well, but having a white athletic top with a flower-printed, button-up shirt on top of that, one of his arms around her waist, the other holding up the peace sign to the camera, a massive grin on the blonde man's face, looking the happiest he had seen the boy in years. We were dating for about a month, and it seemed like we were hitting it off really well, but she said from the beginning that she didn't want a relationship. It always seemed like we were building up to something, but it just never came. Eventually, I fought and beat Daru of Kumo, but when she appeared afterwards, I didn't know what to do, so I left. He admitted, getting a shake of the head from his mentor. That was not the most intelligent of things to do, Naruto-kun. Personal relationships, as with international relationships, should be spoken of as soon as possible, so that emotions cannot build up, and so whatever consequences come from actions, either your own, or those of others, are minimized. You should have simply had a talk with the young lady, even if it were still to simply end with you walking away, stated Mifune with a disapproving frown. At this, Naruto bowed his head, before giving a small nod, not looking at his master. Seeing the boy's reaction, the grizzled teacher sighed, before once again speaking up. Perhaps we should save this discussion for another time. I'm curious to see how much you've improved, Naruto-kun. You may have the next day to relax and meet up with your friends and comrades, and at this time tomorrow, I'd like you to meet me at the large training hall." With that, Naruto nodded, finished his cup of tea, and left the room. Having left his mentor's office, Naruto decided to walk the halls, simply remembering all the warm memories that this frozen place had to offer. Eventually, he found himself in the mess hall, where he was greeted by an old friend. "Naruto Kohai, how are you?" shouted Kentai, who was currently missing his helmet, along with most of the samurai in the room. Kentai was a rather rugged man, his head almost a perfect square, with a thick jawline, his face and head clean-shaven like almost all his comrades. Seeing his friend, Naruto smiled, waving to the older man, and sat down on the opposite side of the table. Reaching across the table, he gripped the man's hand in a friendly embrace, that slowly turned to the two trying to squeeze the life out of the other. "I guess that your time screwing around the countryside is at an end, isn't it?" teased Kentai, his words belying his friendly tone and expression. "Well, I figured that it was time I started teaching you how to use a sword again. I thought you might forget without me here to school you again," responded the blonde, neither one's expression changing, despite the creaking coming from where their hands were joined, though whether it was them or their gloves was uncertain. Slowly, their grips shifted until they were suddenly arm wrestling, the force exerted causing the table to start cracking beneath their elbows. "Naruto-kun, it is a pleasure to see you again. It has been too long," shouted another voice from the entrance, causing Naruto to lose his concentration, and loose the impromptu competition. Knowing who it was, Naruto didn't even turn around at first, only flinching at his samurai comrade's voice and presence. "Oh, shit. Yeah. Yes, it has been, Masanori-san," responded Naruto with a rather forced smile on his face, not really wanting to deal with the man's exuberance. Turning, it was revealed that the new resident of the mess hall was a man who looked to be 7 feet tall, wearing the same armor as the rest of his brothers, with an angular face, littered with small scars. While his face was clean-shaven, he was one of the few in the order who did not have a shaved head, having inch-long brown hair. "I apologize for not seeing you sooner, Naruto-kun. I just got back from training with the initiates, for we must endure the pain of discipline, or else suffer the pain of defeat," shouted the man, banging his right fist against his left pectoral. This earned him a glare from many of those in attendance, except for Kentai, who had an extremely patient smile on his face. "Masanori-san, please lower your voice while inside." "My apologies, I was simply happy that our leader's wayward young apprentice has returned to us. I am looking forward to his tales of his adventures of the lands outside our borders," responded the wall of muscle, getting louder as he went, until he was nearly shouting again. "Speaking of which," started Naruto, before he once again pulled out Kubi Karabocho, shocking everyone in the hall, before they all clamored for him to tell the story. It had been a full 24 hours since Naruto's return to his homeland, and he was currently standing in the middle of the castle's largest training area, and about 10 feet in front of him was his teacher, Mifune. The two of them were wearing their full battle armor, as well as each having a sakabato, a blade where the blunt edge and the sharp edge are reversed. All around them were the samurai who had been using the training ground, most of whom were initiates, people between 10 and 20 years of age, hoping to eventually pass the final ordeal, and become a fully fledged samurai. After about 30 seconds of silence, Mifune contemplating how this was going to happen, before going with the first thing that came to his mind. "Tell me, Naruto-kun, what is a sword to you?" Hearing this, the blonde's eyes opened wide in surprise, as that was a question he hadn't heard since his first ever sparring session using a sword. Flashback. "Tell me, Naruto-kun, what is a sword to you?" asked this strange man who had taken him from his home a year ago, and brought him to this cold dark place. But even with all its faults, he loved Tetsuno Kuni in a way he had never felt before, not realizing that it was now a place he truly considered his home. At the moment, he was standing in the middle of a large enclosed field, with stone walls and wooden ceilings about 40 feet above him, heaters in each corner, with one also affixed to the ceiling in the center of the room. He was wearing a suit of clothing that was just a regular set of clothing that was about an inch thick, made of a strange, almost rigid material. He had been in this place for almost a year now. Time kinda blends together when nothing changes day after day: eat, train, watch the snow fall, sleep, wake up, eat, train, etc., building up his body, as he had been severely malnourished, and had gotten several guests both on and in his body from his brief stint on the street. "What do you mean, old man? A sword is a sword. It's a weapon, isn't it? You use it to kill people," stated the blonde, earning a raised brow from his sensei, and disapproving murmurs from those around him. "I don't get it, is that the wrong answer?" he asked, afraid of having angered the first person to see him as himself, to believe in him, to see his potential, to give him an opportunity. "Only if you believe it to be, Naruto-kun. Now, let's get started," came the kind answer, as the Iron General drew his practice sword. Flashback end. Thinking back to how naive he had been at that point in his life, he wondered whether or not his view of the world then or his view of the world now was the better one. "To me, a sword is an expression of one's self," he stated, earning surprised looks from everyone, including Mifune, who simply raised a brow, asking for an explanation. Words are fickle things that can be twisted to any number of things: truths, falsehoods, manipulations, peace talk, war, anything. But with a sword, you are able to know a person with just one attack, whether they're a soldier, whether they actually want to fight you, who or what they're fighting for, and their fighting style says even more: if they're graceful, if they're aggressive, defensive, whether they go with the flow or if they simply power through the obstacles in their lives. Hearing this, Mifune couldn't help but smile. Such a fascinating answer, and one he might not have given himself, or at least, not exactly. However, Naruto wasn't done. It's not just an expression for the person wielding it either, but also for the one who makes the blade. For some, it's simply what they do for a living, like the ones who make these training swords, but for others, it's their way of life, the one thing they couldn't imagine not doing. At this point, he placed his hand on his Hate, pulling out his fire sword. Regardless of the man's allegiances, regardless of his goals, his hopes for the future, his feelings towards other countries, especially the Big Five, I can feel the love Samui put into every aspect of this sword, from choosing the materials, to hammering out the shape, to sharpening the blade for the first time. Samui was truly a master of his art. With that, he simply stared lovingly at his sword, as he was sure Samui had done when he was alive, before realizing what he was doing and putting it away with a blush. "I have been all around the world in my travels. I've seen people who worship swords, and people who loathed them. I met a family who had a sword on the mantle that was 500 years old, and hadn't been used in 10 generations, but was better taken care of than a career soldier who got his less than a year before. It's an expression of all I am, of all you are, of all anyone is." Seeing the smiling face on his master, Naruto trailed off embarrassedly, rubbing the back of his head as a reflex to ward off the awkward feeling. "Well said, Naruto-kun. Now, let's get started," came the kind answer, as the Iron General placed his hand on the practice sword's hilt. Seeing this, Naruto instantly drew his own blade, getting into a Chunin stance, his hands in front of his pelvis, the tip of the Sakabato aimed at Mifune's eyes. With that, the two simply stood there, minute after minute, looking for the slightest weakness in the other's stance, simply standing there. Finally, at a signal known only to the two of them, they came together, Naruto raising his arms, and bringing them down into a vertical slash aimed at where his right arm met shoulder, and Mifune drawing his sword to block, the stalemate causing a minor shock wave, which was felt by the surrounding men. "It would seem that you've gotten even stronger than you used to be, Kohai," thought Kenji to himself, giving a smirk and an approving nod. Masanori, however, was more exuberant with his praise. "Your growth is most admirable, Naruto-kun. At this rate, you may yet achieve your dream." Ignoring the large man, the two began a furious dance, with Naruto changing his style over and over again, unintentionally showing off his prodigious skills, though the result was the same. During the spar, as with the rest of his life, Naruto was unable to land a single blow on his general, all the while he himself was taking multiple blows, each of which would have either killed or crippled him were they actually in battle. Eventually, Mifune decided he had seen enough, and with a flourish of his blade, he shoved Naruto back so that they once again had distance between them, before sheathing his blade, getting into an Ia stance. "Let's finish this, Naruto-kun," he said, getting a nod from said blonde, who also sheathed his blade, and assumed the same exact stance. With that, the two flashed out of existence, before reappearing where the other had started, with their backs to one another, sheathing their blades. Seconds afterwards, several ringing sounds were heard, like two swords striking one another, before Naruto collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. "You certainly have improved, my student," stated the general, looking at a scuff that had appeared on the back of his left vambrace. 3 days. 3 days is how long it took for Naruto to feel 100% better after his beating at the hands of his first sensei. At the end of those 3 days, were one to look, Naruto could be found sitting in a large hall, various portraits hanging from the walls, some being so old the slightest touch would destroy them, with others being recent enough to actually be photos instead of paintings. This was the hall used to remember the dead, as dead samurai were burned, and their ashes scattered to the winds, due to the frigid climate making burial impossible. The portrait Naruto was staring at was a picture of an incredibly ancient-looking man, his eyes forced shut with age, his waist-length hair gray but for a single streak of red, wrinkles lining his face, with spots on his skin due to age. Though the picture didn't show much more than his head, an observant person would be able to tell that he was wearing his samurai armor, even with his advanced age. This was Naruto's Fuinjutsu teacher. Naruto had never even learned his actual name, the wily old fox being incredibly evasive about it, simply having Naruto call him sensei. It had been a few weeks after his first sparring session with Mifune that Naruto had met the man, who was shuffling along a corridor, wearing an older style of armor than even Mifune. When Naruto had marched up to the man, hoping to make a new friend, the boy was shocked when he had demanded to know who Naruto was, and why a child his age was wandering around the castle. After stumbling along in answer, the two had gotten into an argument as to whether or not the blonde was lying. Eventually, he asked Naruto his name, and when the boy gave it, the old man fell silent, before snarling and shuffling away. It wasn't for another week that Naruto had seen him again, when Mifune stated that the man had asked for Naruto to meet him in his room. Upon arrival, the boy was greeted to a sight of scrolls upon scrolls upon scrolls on a large table with 2 chairs, one of which was taken up by the ancient. Beckoning the blonde to sit, he began to launch into a lesson on seals, and when Naruto said he wasn't really interested, he was told that he would be asked when his interests were wanted. Years later, when asked why the elderly man had deigned to teach Naruto, Mifune simply replied that he and the general had had a very long and thorough talk the day he had met the boy. Surprisingly, the lessons, which occurred every other day, were incredibly easy for Naruto if somewhat tedious. The first thing he was taught was better penmanship than what even Mifune had taught him. After that was basic seal theory, with Naruto being taught how specific strokes of a brush, pen, or other writing utensils affected the seal, and what might happen if they were so much as a millimeter off. After each lesson, he was given a stack of pre-made seal tags, and asked to break them apart, and see what each individual piece did in the overall scheme. It wasn't for another year that Naruto could comfortably say that he actually liked the old man. Eventually, instead of calling him sensei, Naruto had called the man Jiji-sensei. Shocked, he had fallen silent, before a smile appeared on his face, and he thanked Naruto for calling him that. Over the next several years, even as his health diminished, Naruto and his sensei were near inseparable. When not training, or with Mifune, Naruto was with his sensei. Mifune may have shaped Naruto into who he was physically and emotionally, but his Jiji-sensei had shaped him into who he was mentally. Then, he had died. It roughly a month before Naruto left on his journey with Kakashi. Naruto had been sitting next to him, reading a story, as he was too weak to do so himself. At some point, he had gotten Naruto's attention, making Naruto approach his side. When the boy had gotten close enough, he had grabbed the front of Naruto's shirt, dragging the blonde in close. Naruto was then treated to an enthralling sight, as the old man fully opened his eyes for the first time in over a decade, showing that his iris were a lively shade of violet, examining Naruto, looking for something, before he nodded once, and he lay back, giving his final breath soon after. After giving the old man his last rites like any other fallen comrade, it was discovered that he had left everything to Naruto, including a vast sum of wealth, more books than some libraries, a plethora of weapons, and more than 5 dozen scrolls on seals, most of which Naruto hadn't even touched yet. When here, he simply talked to the picture, telling it everything that had happened to him, of all his experiences, of all his battles, of his relationship with Samui. He also talked of books, of his further research on seals, and new theories he had thought up. He talked of everything, and of nothing for hours, until night had fallen, and he had to leave, lest he fall asleep. It had taken him so long to visit, because he only ever wanted to be at 100% when seeing the man. It had been a full week since Naruto had arrived in Tetsu-no-Kuni, and he was in his room once more. Having finally settled in, Naruto was about to do something he hadn't in a long time. Naruto, interestingly enough, was one of the few people who preferred to have a separate room. The usual arrangement for samurai was that during your training, you were kept in one of the barracks nearest the training facilities with all the others, regardless of your age. Then, when you passed your initiation, you were either sent to a different barracks, or allowed a separate room with a minor cut to your pay for rent. Naruto himself had stayed with other initiates until the age of 10, which was when he was given the lodgings he had now. Naruto's room was somewhat frugal, and yet not. At 15 feet by 15 feet, with an 8-foot height, in the far left corner was a single bed, at the foot of which was a chest, holding the few things that he didn't take on his travels. Next to that, in the corner directly to his left, was an armor stand, upon which was a set of tailor-made samurai armor, which was missing the thigh guards. On the opposite wall to the bed was a bookshelf, mostly filled with materials dealing with sealing, combat, or survival, with a few of the books being fiction, including one or two with an orange cover. Finally, next to that, was a desk, easily the largest piece of furniture in the room, with a 3x4 surface which one could angle, several drawers, and various compartments for things like brushes and inkwells. It was one of the few pieces that had not been provided with a room, Naruto designing and paying for it with the money he made from doing jobs around the castle and on his trips with Mifune when he was younger. Finally, all along the walls were weapons, mostly katanas, with a few tanto, a pair of otochi, and even a naginata as well as a kanabo and a yari. Reaching into the chest of his belongings, he pulled out a large roll of papers, each one being about 6 foot by 6 foot, each one having the same design of incredibly intricate seals. Simply looking at them was slightly dizzying with the sheer amount of detail to them, lines crossing, swirling, weaving, it being almost impossible to follow any for more than a few inches, or to really tell where one line stopped, and another began. These had been his greatest sealing accomplishment to date, and even then, it required the help of the man who had taught him the art. It was something that he would still need years to confidently do on his own. Selecting one, he then reached up and grabbed 4 katana which hung directly over the chest. He then walked to the center of the room, and placed the paper down as flat as he could, before stabbing the 4 blades into the corners. Looking at the blades, one would be able to see further seals engraved into the metal, each groove filled within as well. These were given to him by his recently deceased teacher as a part of the inheritance the man had inexplicably given him, costing an amount he didn't even want to fathom. Sitting in the sit-and-shana style in the middle of the array, Naruto closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he was staring at a massive gate, held shut by a seal tag, the floor flooded with several inches of water. And that's the end of the chapter. I'd just like to say, I've really fucked myself over with the timeline. With all of the casual references made in the story to Naruto's age and stuff, you could probably kinda make one as well, though if you'd like, I can release as an omake in the next chapter, but I've really forced myself to work in the margins. For example, I stated that Naruto hadn't seen Kakashi in a year, and that they traveled together for a year, meaning that all of my flashback omake series, he has to be either 14 or 15, which really messed with this chapter's omake, because I originally wrote him as 16. Now an omake almost had him. It had been about 5 months since his traveling companion, a Konoha Anbu codenamed Inu, had joined him on his travels, 7 months since he had been home, and about 2 weeks since his last near-death experience. Currently, a 15-year-old Naruto, his birthday having been the previous month, sat in a bar, clutching a rather expensive bottle of what he assumed was alcoholic piss water as he sat at a booth near the back, waiting for the man to get back. The man had received a message from his village, asking him to investigate some suspicious activity, rumored to be connected to an A-rank missing nin from Konoha. Having left a few days ago, Naruto was hoping that his traveling companion was coming back soon. Drinking, however, provided a problem for him. Even most normal shinobi and samurai had trouble getting drunk from anything less a drink that was 20% alcohol. This was due to the extensive physical, mental, and spiritual training they put themselves through to achieve chakra also increased their metabolisms, as well as conditioned their bodies to flush impurities, as well as unneeded fats and nutrients. This was why most had amazing figures, except for the Akimichi clan, who were both traditionally and genetically predisposed to obesity, as it allowed them to use their techniques, which converted calories into chakra, and even they had to eat almost constantly, and in massive quantities. For Naruto, it was also compounded with the Baijuu chakra in his system, filtering out most things seen as harmful to him. He solved this with a bandage, wrapped around his left arm, covered in seals which restricted his chakra, allowing him to get drunk if the drink was hard enough. Normally, he would be hesitant to do this even with Inu around, but he was bored out of his mind, and wanted some relief, as he couldn't spar with anyone, and he had promised Inu to stay near the tavern they booked a room at, and he didn't even have any books, as Inu had taken the scroll they were kept in, as they also contained the Onbuzicha Icha. Finding himself rather tipsy halfway through his second bottle, he was mildly interested to see the door burst open and a woman walk in. Frowning, she scanned the room, only to grin upon seeing Naruto. Eventually, she began a slow gait up to the table, swaying her hips in an obviously practiced, but seldom used, sensual stride. The woman was relatively short in comparison to even Naruto, being only about 4'7", with Naruto almost a full foot taller than her. She had long, red hair, with eyes that had black iris so dark that it looked like she had large pupils, and together with a slashed kirihite, she also had a simple cloth around her head, distinctively tied at both sides so as the ends of the material protrude upwards, while the remainder of hair flowing downwards. She wore a loose, pinstriped long-sleeve shirt with a dark obi around the waist, black pants which got much looser near the ends, resembling hakama, and striped leg warmers, as well. "Well, hello handsome, what does a girl have to do to get a man to buy her a drink around here?" she asked, sliding into the seat and pushing herself against him, a mischievous smirk on her face that looked rather threatening with her shark-esque fangs. "For starters, you have to be attractive," mused the slightly tipsy blonde, looking at her with half-lidded eyes. Hearing this, she scowled and nearly pulled out a kunai to stab him, until he finished the thought, putting an even larger smirk on her face than before. "And you've certainly got that covered." "Do I now?" she purred, as she reached across the table, grabbed his drink, downed it in one go, and grimaced as the taste hit her. "You're not drinking for the taste, are you?" inquired the woman, before shrugging, and pouring herself another drink. "Does anyone?" he murmured to himself, signaling to the bartender for another bottle. "That's a rather good question. So, what's your name, good-looking?" "Naruto. You?" "The name's Amayuri. What do you say to having a few drinks with a beautiful woman?" "I'm so fucking tired of this shit. All I do is kill, and kill, and kill. I just wanted to serve my country to the best of my abilities, Naruto-kun," slurred Amayuri, a drunken blush on her face. About 9 bottles of alcohol littered around the table, and her holding Naruto's arm to her chest, grinding it against the area between her breasts. "I've done terrible things in my life, all for my cage and my country, and how am I repaid?" At this point, her left arm detached from Naruto's, grabbed the almost empty 10th bottle, before waving it around, and draining it after finishing her thought. "I get told I'm a genetic freak and they try to have me executed. I don't want to do this anymore. My duty to Mizuno Kuni was my only real reason to exist, and now, that's been taken away from me." "Well, Amayuri-chan, if you don't want your swords, I'll take them," he slurred, removing his arm from her grip, wrapping it around her, and downing part of the 11th bottle, which was handed to him by the server, Amayuri almost sitting in his lap at this point. "You want my swords, Naruto-kun? Well then, what do you say we make some kind of deal? Maybe we can hammer out the details in your room. What do you say?" Less than 5 minutes later, the two of them slammed through the door to Naruto and Inu's room, furiously making out, drunk off their asses. As they went, they began to shed clothing, arriving at the bed topless and barefoot. At that point, Amayuri jumped up, wrapping her legs around Naruto's waist, her arms around his neck, knocking him onto the bed with her on top. Sitting up, in this position, even drunk, Naruto couldn't help but notice that Amayuri's breasts were larger than they first looked, even though they weren't massive, being only a high B, low C, as opposed to the A he had thought them to be. Taking his hands off her ass, where they had mysteriously appeared, during a break in the rather heavy makeout session, Naruto reached up and began to clumsily grope the woman, earning moans even though this was the first time he had ever done this. After several minutes of letting him explore, the red-headed woman's hands sought out his own, and hoisted them above his head. "Sorry, Naruto-kun, but I'm in charge right now. Just sit there, and let me do all the work." And with that, the two of them once again entered a heated makeout session, during which the mind of Naruto, too muddled by alcohol and new experiences, was unable to realize that her hands were slowly positioning his. Click. "What the hell?" demanded Naruto, feeling the handcuffs around his wrists, keeping his hands behind his back. Normally, Naruto would have simply broken free immediately, but he honestly wanted to see where this was going. "I told you I'm the one in charge, didn't I?" stated the dominate woman, giving an uncharacteristic giggle from a mixture of alcohol and the look on her soon-to-be lover's face. "Tell you what, you be a good boy, and I might take them off." That said, she reached a hand down to the back of her waist, slowly drawing one of the kiba blades with which she had become so famous using. "You want these? Tell you what, you do a good enough job, and you can have them." It was at that point, however, that the two of them heard a noise. Looking over to the door, they realized that they had, in their drunken stupor, left it open. That thought remained in their heads for about a fraction of a second, before a foot enveloped one sight. Crash. "Naruto, I'm here to help you," shouted Inu, grabbing Naruto by one of his still cuffed arms, hoisting Naruto onto his shoulders, and disappearing in a sunshine, ignoring the woman he had sent through a wall with his kick. Reappearing out in the middle of a forest, all their bags somehow strewn about the area, Inu put Naruto down, using a chakra-enhanced kunai to remove the handcuffs, before trying to tear off the seal restricting Naruto's chakra. "Naruto, are you alright? You're not hurt, are you? I was going to arrive earlier, but I had to deal with more than one Nukenin on the mission. Tell me, do you have any pain? Did she inject you with anything? Was she trying to learn Sumith? Why are you looking at me like that?" questioned Inu, his speech rapid until the last question, worried sick over the boy, before he realized that his traveling companion was glaring at him with eyes that promised death, and a blush that enveloped most of his face. "Look, Naruto, I know you were probably mad about being captured, but wham!" he began, only for a powerful heel drop to crack him over the top of his head, knocking him unconscious instantly. "Bastard!" grumbled Naruto, before he started to get dressed once more, hoping to head back to Amiyuri, before the alcohol in his system, as well as Kakashi's amateur messing with the seal on his arm caused him to collapse. And, even into old age, that would be the only incident for which Naruto could never forgive his friend, refusing to even talk about it, even though he himself wasn't sure if he was more mad at the loss of the Kibas, or for being interrupted. Sitting in the city Hanshanastai in the middle of the array, Naruto closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he was staring at a massive gate, held shut by a seal tag, the floor flooded with several inches of water. Upon further inspection of his surroundings, it was revealed that he was in a sewer, numerous large industrial pipes making seeing the actual ceiling near impossible in the connecting tunnels. The room he was in was so massively tall that it was in fact physically impossible to see the roof, it being lost in darkness. The gates in front of him also had a few additions as well. Several Shimenawa ropes that were almost twice as thick as he was tall were affixed to the front of the gates, with numerous shide tags hanging from them. They were held up by massive silver spikes in the walls next to the gates. In front of the massive gates was a torii gate, as well as one at each of the much smaller openings to the side passages to the rest of the facility. Looking down, he noticed that, as always whenever he did this, he was still sitting on the paper, with the four katana around him, the water halted by an invisible wall, simply hanging in mid-air, leaving the paper completely untouched. Looking up, he could see the large, uncaring eyes of the beast within, staring at him apathetically. The creature had been like this for a while now, ever since Naruto and his Gigi had imposed the much harsher restrictions on the seal. He had grown lethargic, sparing no effort to even move around all that much. It didn't even shift, simply cracking its eyes to the minimum required to actually see its host. "What do you want?" drawled the QB, the entire sentence coming out in a single whispered breath, showing its unending boredom. "Why do you insist upon doing it?" stated the blonde, both of them knowing exactly what he was talking about. "What else would you have me do? With what you and that accursed old man did, I don't even get an impression of a feeling of the outside I so desperately craved." Looking from the beast to the actual seal, Naruto could see that while the bars were more or less fine, the actual paper keeping them together looked like it had been found in a 6,000-year-old cave, yellowed and flaking, ready to fall apart at the slightest touch. "Why do you resist? Why do you not give in? The unending pleasure that absolute power can bring is a very beautiful thing. You have seen what I can give you, so why do you not let me?" As the beast talked, small, slender tendrils of red power slid through the bars, circling Naruto, almost seductive in their movements. As they approached him, they were stopped, almost as if the swordsman were in a glass box, halting, like the water, at the barrier formed by the edges of the paper he was sat upon. The tendrils then began to move along the barrier, almost caressing it, causing a shudder to run through Naruto. Yes, he did know the pleasure. Each time it happened, it was harder and harder to get away from. The first time he had had a true taste of it was roughly a year after he had met his Fuinjutsu teacher. The man had been studying his seal, and had decided to see what loosening it would do. They had been in a completely desolate area, when it happened, nothing around for hundreds, maybe thousands of miles, except snow, rocks, and pine trees. It had been a foolish thing, but an irresistible curiosity for the both of them. The aged samurai had apparently had too much faith in the strength of the seal. In an experiment, the man had loosened the seal by roughly 5%. Thinking that it would allow Naruto to draw an additional 5% of the Kyuubi's chakra, but he had almost immediately gone into a three-tailed state, almost killing the man, if it weren't for Kentai and Mifune, who had been brought in for security. It had taken almost a full day, and impaling Naruto with 7 of the katana he was currently surrounded by, but they had gotten him under control. This, however, had led to its own problem. The seals on the swords, as well as the tampering with the seal on his stomach, was leading to degradation. The seal master, seeing this, had immediately begun layering seal, after seal, after seal, after seal, in attempts to patch the damage. The man would be the first to acknowledge that the person whom had designed Naruto's seal was an utmost master, someone who had expert teaching and years of experience. He, however, was better. But no matter how much better he was, this particular seal was amongst the highest in its class, and not much could be done besides completely redo it, and no one there felt like releasing the beast, just to reseal it, if they even could, causing the death of the old man, if not Naruto, Kentai, and Mifune as well. This led to the current situation, whereupon Naruto could call upon barely enough chakra to change his eyes. This change was not very beneficial to either the sealed, nor the sealer, in the end. Naruto was no longer getting a steady stream of the Kyuubi's chakra, and it in turn was no longer able to influence the boy. Thus, it had to be sneakier, more cunning, more manipulative. It was forced to go from trying to brute force down the boy's defenses, to finding cracks, weaknesses. And if there was one thing that was a common weakness in both its previous hosts, it was addiction. Both were addicted to ramen, and its second host had an addiction to adrenaline, the thrill of battle. This, unfortunately, had been suppressed when the woman had become a housewife, marriage and the civilian livelihood mellowing her considerably. The current Jinchuriki had never eaten ramen, due to Mifune's insistence that he eat that which was healthy, but he did get a rush from battle, training, and spars. Kyuubi decided to exploit this, attempting to use Naruto's weakened state after battle to exert its influence. Naruto's life goal of becoming the best swordsman in the world was instrumental in this. The more he fought, the more he got injured, and the more he was able to tempt the boy. The power during the fight with Hoki was exhilarating, but he was focused so much on Hoki that it didn't particularly affect him. His time in his three-tailed state was also awe-inspiring, but he was almost completely unconscious, and when he did come to, he had been nailed to the dirt by several lengths of steel. It was only after they had been removed, and the new seals applied, that it had happened. The fox had tried to force its way out once more, but what once was a faucet, turned broken spigot was now a leaky pipe. If it wasn't able to physically see what it was doing, it would have thought it wasn't doing anything at all. The bijou had been forced to think, to strategize. It instead began to change what it was doing, making itself Pavlovian in nature, attempting to get the boy to associate it with pleasure. The result had been a child with hugely dilated eyes, a huge smile, drool, and a twitching body. The three adults had been unaware of what exactly was happening, only for the seal master to place yet another layer of sealing upon Naruto, and them to return home to await the consequences. Shamefully, as Naruto was only about 6 at the time, he was easily influenced, and wanted to feel the sensation again when he came to once more when he was released from the infirmary. This led to him trying to once again call upon the beast's chakra, wanting more, only to find that he couldn't. Seeing the new layers of seals, he realized that he was able to remove one or two, which he promptly did, only for nothing to once again happen. The overwhelming urge was taking hold, and led him to drastic measures. Thinking about how he was hurt, last time, he stabbed himself in the arm, causing untold pain as he dragged the knife through his flesh. The pain melted into mind-numbing nothingness, however, as the chakra once more enveloped him. The first time he did this, he was almost caught, as he had to clean the blood, and reapply the seal. The fourth time he did this, he was caught, having forgotten to redo the barrier. After an hour of interrogation by the three adults, he finally confessed what he had been doing. The manic look on his face when telling his teachers was utterly disturbing. This led to 2 years of never being left alone again, only being allowed to use the restroom by himself. This was combined with several more seals having been laid upon him, a lot of which were taken off as he proved to be more trustworthy. On his 8th birthday, he was allowed to live with the other apprentices, who were all older than him, and on his 10th, he was given his own room. It was also during this 2-year process that he discovered narcotics. He had very badly broken his arm at one point, and since he was sealed off from the chakra of the beast, he was given powerful pain medication to help. The first time he had taken it, he was instantly terrified of the incredibly similar feeling, and had at once decided to stop taking it. His teachers were worried about him, of course, but upon hearing his reasons, they had of course accepted his decision. Each day was a struggle for him, and so was each battle. He had to take extra care to not be injured, so as to not have to go through the temptation. Naruto simply sat there, his mouth suddenly feeling dry, as he held out a shaking hand towards the tendrils. The Kyuubi shifted slightly, hoping against hope, before Naruto made a fist, slamming it into the array below him as he scowled. "I warned you what would happen, Bijou," yelled the blonde, before he held his other hand over his stomach and twisted, causing a massive string of magatama to wrap like a chain around the bars holding the cage shut, encircling even the seal tag. This led to the tendrils of chakra being severed, writhing like snakes as they slowly dispersed. The Kyuubi was also thrown into complete darkness, unable to see outside of its prison, even though it could still hear it when Naruto spoke. "I do not enjoy what I do, but nor do I enjoy my trust being betrayed. In 30 days, I will withdraw this level of sealing. In this time, I wanted to think of what you have done." With those words, the blonde was gone, leaving the fox to its cruel, dark solitude. Kumaga Core. While everything was going on with the blonde, Samui too was going through introspection. Naruto was in her whole world. He wasn't the love of her life, he wasn't even really her boyfriend. However, Naruto was someone very special to her in a way no one else was. She still trained as hard as she was allowed, no sense exhausting herself right before the Chunin exams. She still went on a few missions, and still did some community service besides. It wasn't as though Naruto leaving had destroyed her or anything, but it had hurt. Whenever she was alone, she would think of their strange relationship, of the completely out-of-character thoughts that had gone through her head upon first meeting him, of him being hers, and the father of her children. She pondered these experiences, and just couldn't explain them. Sure, she'd been horny at points in her life, masturbated, had a boyfriend. She had dumped his ass soon after her first time giving oral, a disastrous experience that she vowed to never repeat. She had experimented with Karu one night after the redhead had somehow gotten her piss drunk, another experience she vowed to never repeat, though it was far more pleasant. She had even tried non-traditional stimulation once. All these experiences had dulled her to the concepts of love and attraction, and then Naruto steps in, and crushes her. Were her thoughts simply a result of being specially in tune with her instincts that day, a desire for a strong mate to sire strong children? Or perhaps she was just a lusty bitch under the cold bitch exterior. Either way, introspection was the only real way for her to try to get through the situation, as she didn't feel it was something a shrink should be consulted about. It didn't interfere with her work, nor her training, but made her a little depressed that he left without much of a goodbye. With that thought, she determined that she should simply take things at their own pace, maybe find another person to be with, to see if that same feeling popped up. Perhaps she'd simply find Naruto at some point, and have a conversation of their relationship. She knew where he lived, and she did have limited access to the messenger birds, even if she had to go through a lengthy application process for the privilege. Or, she could simply allow the cards to fall as they please. Were she single all her life, that would be more than fine with her, as she'd have more time to simply hone her skills and advance in rank. With Naruto, after his encounter with the QB, he was left feeling both unclean and racked by guilt over what he had done to the bijou. And so, he decided to cleanse himself. Decked in a white robe, and clutching a string of prayer beads, he went to a very special hot spring, joined by several of the other samurai, similarly equipped. Passing a shrine, he waited in line. When it was his turn, like all the others, he first washed his hands at the small fountain, before stepping up to the shrine itself. He then tossed 50 yen into the box. He then bowed twice, before clapping his hands loudly twice. After doing so, he gave a short prayer for his loved ones, his dreams, and to be cleansed, before bowing once more and joining those whom had already gone into the spring. Once there, he simply crouched in the water, chanting lowly with the rest as he bathed. Cha no Kuni. On a desolate part of the shore, there was a part of the shore where the water rose and fell several meters. It was at the time of lowest tide, where an entrance was revealed. Lined with coral, the entrance was small, only able to fit 2 people side by side, and low enough to force most. The tunnel was long, stretching roughly a mile, with a downward slope. Towards the end, the tunnel took a sharp upturn as it opened up into a large cavern, which stayed dry even when at high tide. Small creatures were everywhere, all giving off a soft fluorescent glow, enough to see by. At the rear of the cavern were several tweed mats, arranged in lines in front of an altar. The altar was crafted from sea stone and more coral, and upon it sat various fish skeletons, many of which were the only of their kind to ever be seen by humans, and in the direct center lay yet more coral. On top of this coral lay a large blue sphere. The sphere was about 6 inches in diameter, lightly pulsing with more blue light. With each pulse, small amounts of water flowed from the orb, gently flowing down to the cavern floor. Behind the altar lay a massive skeleton. It was about 60 feet tall, and looked to be twice as long. The bones looked to belong to a mix of a lizard and a fish. The sleek rib cage giving way to a long neck, topped with a frilled skull. The hands were long and wide, the tail looking more like an oar. The skull of the beast was a few feet above the orb, its empty sockets staring like a silent sentinel. The whole of the skeleton was sprinkled with more of the small fluorescent beings, giving the entire thing an even more otherworldly appearance, one of them even being in the right socket, giving the bones a feeling of judging the proceedings in front of it. On the other side of the altar were a group of roughly 50 people. Each of them were wearing robes of blue and green. These robes were decorated with yet more coral, sea stone, and fish bones. There were even some who were draped in various vegetation and scales, with one even having the body of a jellyfish balanced on their shoulder. All but one were kneeling before the altar, prostrating themselves while humming a seemingly aimless tune. In front of all of them was a single woman. Her robes were the only in the group to be completely plain, with no decorations whatsoever. Her head was shaved, and scarred, her eyes being a stunning seafoam green. She stood before the altar, arms spread, chanting in a language that only she knew. This ceremony was just one more of the several hundred the group had done so far. Starting from when the woman first found the cave after nearly dying to abandon trade. She had slowly one by one gained more followers for the Lord of the Sea, each person giving a little to the cause. Yes, giving to the cause, not to her. She did not deserve, the cause did. Maybe she had been enlightened, maybe she had suffered mentally from her experiences. Either way, she was happy, she was healthy, and she had a purpose. Suddenly, during the middle of the ceremony, there was a loud bang, and the entire cavern shook. This caused the entire congregation to stop and look around, worried there was an earthquake, or something of that nature. They couldn't escape at the moment, since it was high tide, and the tunnel was flooded. Again and again, boom after boom, the cavern shook, until all fell silent. After a brief pause, one last boom, louder than all the others happened, and the roof of the cavern came down, showering them with rubble and dust, crushing and killing several. Waiting for the dust to clear, a shape suddenly came barreling out, slamming into a group of them, splattering them into a red paste. When all was calm, it was revealed to be a man, 7 foot tall, short brown hair, built like an Olympian god, smeared with red from the people he just killed. Suddenly, 2 more men dropped down from the hole in the ceiling, landing behind the Adonis. Both of them were wearing deep green cloaks, one a foot taller than the other, with the taller of the 2 being a foot and a half shorter than the killer. "Kill them," Ranga, the shorter of the 2, told the man, causing him to grin, let out a massive yell, shaking the cavern again, and throw himself at the worshippers. They tried to defend themselves, but they were completely helpless to do so before the might of Ranga. They were peaceful, and had no weapons. The rocks and coral they picked up doing nothing but bounce off the tall man's skin. Soon, only one was left, the head worshipper, who hadn't moved from her spot, only turning to watch the carnage, with a look of despair on her face. After a moment of silence, her expression morphed to one of anger, as she put her hands together. As she did, a blue aura enveloped both her, the orb, and the skeleton, as the water all raised and shot towards Ranga. So fierce was the water, that the man couldn't do anything. It wasn't enough to actually physically harm him, but it pushed him into the rear wall, making it impossible for him to actually move, slowly drowning him. Eventually, however, as the woman's victory seemed assured, the taller of the 2 cloaked men slammed his hand on the ground, causing black lines to appear, and the glow to instantly disappear. When this happened, the head priestess was only able to gasp in shock, before her entire right side was blasted off from the force of Ranga's punch. "Good work, Hone, Ranga," stated the smallest of the 3 men, as he slowly walked forward towards the altar. Ignoring their responses, he simply reached out and grabbed the orb, bringing it up to his face, illuminating his smirk. However, when he grabbed the orb, the cavern began to shake once more, as a loud groaning sound sounded out around them. With this, the skeleton began to tremble, the head slowly rising. This earned a tilt of the head from the one with the orb, who reached into his cloak, and slashed once with his weapon, before putting it back before anyone could see what it was. The beast continued to tremble for a little before simply falling apart, split perfectly in 2. Seeing this, the short figure placed the orb in an inner pocket of the cloak, before jumping up into the hole in the ceiling with the other 2 as the cavern flooded behind them. With Naruto. The time had come. A month had passed, and the next morning, Naruto, Mifune, and Kantai were slated to head to Konohagakure. The 3 of them would be there for the entirety of the Chunin exams. What would normally take perhaps a week at most, due to the Chunin exam preparations, other diplomats arriving for similar reasons, the political shitstorm that was Naruto, Sarutobi most likely to try and convince the boy to stay in the village, and the political pressure from various daimyo would ensure that it would take much longer than that. Mifune's second-in-command, Okasuke, would be filling the role as leader of the country during their absence. Currently, Naruto was in his room, dressed only in the skin-tight black bodysuit that all samurai wore, deciding what to take, and what to leave behind. The first thing being that for this trip, he would forego his normal attire, and dress in his personal set of samurai armor. This would show his loyalty, and that he was a member of the diplomatic party. Hopefully, this would lessen the number of altercations due to his presence. He refused to wear the full headgear, though, leaving the helmet, those horns were ridiculous, and face mask, but taking the rebreather, as it would cover the whisker marks on his face. Another thing he took being the 4-ceiling katana, just in case. Several more weapons, including his spear and bow, sealed into his hate. Several books on seals, general supplies and toiletries inside scrolls that he'd keep on a harness at the small of his back. Looking at himself in the mirror of his room, dressed in his full set of armor for the first time in over a year, Naruto's only thought was, "This is where I belong, this is my home. Nothing that old man can do or say will change that." Walking down the path to Konoha was uneventful, other than the group passing a pair of men in black cloaks with red clouds. Both were wearing the straw hats associated with farmers, so it was hard to see their faces. One was a squat man, seemingly crawling on all fours, a black mask on his face as well. The other was a blonde, with a strand blocking their face. As they passed by, the blonde politely tipped their hat to the three men, who each nodded in return.